Welcome to Table Talk, the place for deep conversations in the Geekverse. And trust me, when we tear into a subject, we go deep. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. Each episode, I'll be talking with one or more creators, authors, illustrators, publishers, or other movers and shakers in games, TV, books, movies, or other areas of the Geekverse. Regular guests include Douglas A. Burton, the author of Faraway Bird, a multi-award-winning historical fiction novel of the Byzantine Empress Theodora. He's also the author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, an alternative story structure to the hero's journey that often occurs in stories with feminine heroes. That structural framework frequently comes up in our analysis of story. Brianna De Silva, she's the director and co-writer of The Cultists, a Lovecraftian comedy mockumentary-style web show here on YouTube, and the author of The City of Reckoning, an epic fantasy novel of political intrigue, the ethics of war, and young love. Cameron Pasha is a screenwriter, director, novelist, and was a writer and producer on the series Kings, a producer on NBC's Bionic Woman, and a co-producer and writer for Sleeper Cell. He's also written for the CW series Nikita and Roswell, New Mexico. He's been breaking news from inside Lucasfilm, Disney, and Hollywood. His analysis and commentary have become very popular on YouTube. We regularly meet to discuss and analyze stories, and when we do, we dive into graduate-level seminars on story structure and writing. Come on in and let's go deep. And when I say we're going deep, I mean you'd better bring your hard suit. Other guests have included Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels Once Upon a Unicorn, the creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and the author of Star Wars, A Pirate's Price, the book that explains why the Millennium Falcon is on the planet Batu at Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Mark Tassin, the creator of the World of Ataltis, head of Mechanical Muse, former director of the Gen Con Writers Symposium, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. Let's see, who else?
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. Not yet. Maybe soon, though. But I have interviewed Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games, crowdfunder extraordinaire, and publisher of many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. Brian Colin, sculptor of the world of Revelo Monster Busts, and the creator of the vast grim dark horror RPG. Ajit George, the Dungeons & Dragons author. We talked about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft, and the development of the Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne, and the goddess of death.
Well, actually, that interview got rather spicy, so I think I'd better just keep that one to myself. Kate Wilson, a YouTuber, actress, host, and prolific geek guru who's now working to make a new show dedicated to the world of tabletop gaming a reality. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride, because it's time to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and all of geekdom through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger, ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Table Talk this Tuesday night. We are talking about Arcane Season 2, Act 3, but I'm sure we're going to be talking about the entire Season 2 as well, now that we have the conclusion to it. I hope to see some new people in the chat. We got a lot of people watching here. I welcome to everyone I see in the chat. If you're new here, please do give us a shout out. We saw we got lots of people, new people were watching some of the clips from the last week's show that I put out. And yes, okay, this is our first time to talk about all of Season 2. And all of Season 2, yes. So we are bringing back Douglas A. Burton. Welcome, Doug.
Hey, everybody. How you doing tonight?
You have a new face in the chat. Welcome, Jamie. Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
And then also, why can't I? Oh, there we go. Brianna De Silva. There she is. And also
Hello.
Brianna. So we are here. Oh, we also have Jacob, another new face. Welcome. All right, this is fantastic. Good to see everybody.
This is an important discussion and one that needs to be had. Arcane, I think, is culturally relevant. I mean, it's one of the greatest. Season 1 was one of the greatest TV events of all time, in my opinion. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, and last time I thought was a very interesting discussion, because I think that it might have been the discussion where we had the greatest disagreement both on the panel and then also in the chat.
Oh, for real?
So yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, we're often kind of in agreement about things or tossing around new ideas and things like that. You know, not always, but
I
I mean,
wasn't
often
paying
I think
attention to the chat. That's why
on
I
a
asked.
consistent basis across that. I guess. Hi, Ivo. Man, see, lots of new people here.
Well, and also, we were, in the first 2 rounds of this, it was Act 1, it was Act 2, and whenever it got really passionate in the discussion, somebody always pulled the lever. They were always like, well, it hasn't ended yet, so we really don't know. Well, now it's ended. So that is out of here.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, I mean, there's been a lot that's been said on this online and everything else, and I know that Better with Bacon already had a discussion about this with Sable Phoenix, the Titter Pig RPG, on his channel on Sunday, and so now basically it's our time to go. We were trying to decide how to structure this conversation, and so we thought that we would let everybody do kind of an opening statement on the whole thing,
like we're about to be in like a political debate.
right? Where we were with all of this. Then Brianna had. It seemed like in the pre-episode in the discussion about the discussion that a lot of us had decided to sort of moderate our critiques to a higher level.
Yeah, it feels more productive that way. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that will be more productive, right? Yes. So we
like
will
Victor, we're going to evolve our opinion.
Imperfections. It's like everything's imperfect, but if we're looking at it from a big picture of like, well, these are the things that on a higher level aren't working or should have been handled differently. I don't know, that just feels like it's where my mind prefers to be, I suppose, when I'm looking at someone else's work. I'll be a perfectionist on my own.
So we're gonna talk about like opening statements here. Then Brianna said she has 3 major topics to discuss. So we're gonna have Brianna go through her 3 major topics, and we will discuss those as she brings them up. And then Doug has something very interesting to share. He was talking about how this kind of like it might be inspiring a new project for him, and has another. And so then we will go into Doug's. And then from there, if there's anything that has been on my list that hasn't been talked about already, then okay, then I'll bring it up. But this could already be a heck of a conversation here. So, Brianna, you want to start with like an opening statement or something?
An opening statement,
or something.
I'll basically just say live what I said to 2 of you through text. So the first 2 acts, I was very much like, I was enjoying them a lot. And my big thing was that like, I didn't have like a big picture view of what the overall season was. But I was enjoying the individual elements, that I was watching. And now that I have the full picture, I am in the camp of like, okay, well, I still enjoy a lot of the individual elements, but they really don't work together. And I what I think is wrong is that I feel like they didn't spend enough time really nailing down their story structure, because like I said, all the individual elements are great and they're cool and they're fun and they're emotional, except that a lot of the emotion is not as strong as it could be because the structure is not right. And so some of the setups and payoffs are not lining up the way they should. And so that's basically my critique, is that it needed more time in that stage creatively of like really nailing down the story. And my big takeaway from that, I'll just say one more thing in my opening statement. Just give me for 10 more seconds. Like for me, like that's something that I've kind of always, as a creator, not always, but something that I've come to kind of accidentally. I'm in that place where usually whenever I work on a story, it sits for several years, like I'm thinking about the story before I get the chance to write it. And that's only because I have so many stories. So it just takes a while to get around to them. But it really reinforced for me the feeling of, oh, I should keep doing that. Like that's a really valuable to spend time getting the story down before you execute it. So.
Excellent. Yeah. For me, I did not like Act 1. I could tell almost immediately that there was some storytelling mistakes being made, some flaws, and but I really loved Arcane season 1. In fact, it's some of my favorite television viewing of all time. You could hop into any episode at any point and get sucked in immediately. It's the story's just that good. The characters are just that compelling. It's got everything you could possibly want. The animation is at the highest levels possible. Probably some of the best animation I've seen. And so The bar is high. The bar is high. So when I started season 2 and I did not, the animation was there. Let me say that from an artistic standpoint, season 2 has lost nothing.
The
From
execution's great.
The animation is outstanding. Some of the cinematics are incredible. Some of the stylization they did were just excellent. But I noticed that the writing was different. There was something different about the writing in Act 1, and I was not pleased. Act 2, I felt recovered a little bit. There was things that I liked, specifically in episodes 5 and 6. So I thought Act 2 seemed to be trending in the right direction. And so I was eager to see if Act 3 was going to blow it off, blow the lid off and recover in full. Unfortunately, I feel like Act 3, there was a complete story collapse. I felt like the problems inherent in Acts 1 and 2 were not reversed, but exasperated. And I felt like it was a story collapse. That said, as frustrated as I am with season 2, this show can recover. Stranger Things recovered from a bad season and all this other stuff. I think as time goes by, this will be identified as a bad season. I believe that. I've had similar vibes here with The Last Jedi, with Game of Thrones season 8, with some other things that where there was a social desire for the franchise to succeed so much that if you're the one saying, I think this is flawed, it's like you're the party pooper. No one wants to hear about that. No one wants to hear negativity about our beloved franchise. Get out of here. So I've
characters I love.
Yes. So I've experienced this before. I've gone through this before, and I think that will happen again here. But that's what we're here to talk about.
Okay, so on a high level, maybe I'm not quite, maybe I'm a bit lower level than that. Because I went through and I was giving ChatGPT a bunch of my notes and asked it to organize for it as I was ending the show. But as I've been thinking about it more, I'm like, well, okay, I think that the show had an unwillingness to let some characters to either see the terrible things that they've done or experience the consequences of those actions throughout that, which is not what I was expecting. I felt like that the season 2 became much more action oriented than the character kind of orientation that we were expecting. I was very disappointed that the Piltover Zahn issue was resolved. Almost kind of papered over. I mean, I kind of felt like, whereas that was a core part of season 1. And as a result, in general, I thought several things were, bless you.
I almost fell out of my chair from that sneeze.
Were resolved in what I kind of felt were some of the easiest ways possible. That like, okay, we've got to deal with something. And so how can we resolve it? Well, maybe we don't really want to deal with it. And there might be reasons that they don't want to deal with it because like if you're talking about seeing Kate as a dictator or, dealing with Jinx doing some terrible things, or even Vi doing some terrible things when she's an enforcer. I can kind of hear now Cameron in the back of my mind going, okay, but you got to have these people like these characters. And if this is part of a franchise that maybe maybe that's part of the reason that we can't actually go to the places that I feel like I might have gone if, especially now, one of the things is like, you can't, that I want to make sure when I'm writing in the next thing that I'm really opening up and I'm going where I want to go. So maybe that was something that was held back, by the, Doug, asked me what I was thinking about it as I was watching season 3 or act 3. And I thought that I had just watched season 7 or episode 7. And the reaction to that I've noticed online is very different to the rest of them. Because I said, I told Doug, I was enjoying it. Because actually when I started into act 3, I was like, do I just not understand how to watch a story anymore? Let me just try to watch this and see what's going. And, a lot of people positively responded to 7, which is by the way, there's spoilers all over here. In case you
don't
spoiler alert.
There's spoilers
haven't watched it.
And I think that's because it was the kind of storytelling that was more like season 1. Now, unfortunately, to me, it was in an alternate universe, which I don't typically care for in time travel. We talked about some stories where that works, like Terminator and Star Trek 4 and things like that. But that's just me. But I feel like, I think people are responding to that so positively because it's a return to the kinds of things we cared about a lot in season 1. But then by the time I was done with it, I was like, I had no idea that this was going to end in like a Marvel style battle with org-like zombies.
Yeah, we're introduced in like
zombies.
season or episode 7.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I just watched it. I just watched all of Act 3, and the weird part, and just watched it through. And the weird part was that I just kind of felt nothing at the end. I didn't. I mean, there were some great moments. Like I do like that Kate and Vi got together. I mean, a lot of people were cheering at that point. It wasn't completely emotional, but by the time I got to, okay, this is a big battle and whatever, I was thinking it was going to end in a different way. So, or it didn't go. It was in the direction that I didn't know it was going. And actually, I wonder, Brianna, when you and I have talked a lot about if we have multiple threads, trying to end them at the same time. Which, in a story that like, okay, we got this and this. And so if you end one and then, we got to go on further to end the other one, that if you can make those ends happen together, that it's stronger. And I think that was a problem here.
That's very insightful. Yeah. That's a very distinct storytelling skill that's like a really difficult to pull off. But when you have so many different, but it's really necessary to make a climax work.
Yeah. So I guess it hadn't occurred to me, or I guess my thinking was that the resolution of Vi and Jinx, whatever it was going to be, was going to reflect the resolution between Zaun and Piltover, and like hit at the same time. The conclusion, whatever. And it doesn't do that. We resolve things and go on. So that, like, Doug and I were talking, like, after you had gone, Brianna, we were like, man, you know what? We talked about all of Act 2 for like 2.5 hours and didn't even talk about Victor or Jace. I mean, and then I felt like I feel like we could talk for 2.5 hours about this one and not mention Jace, not mention Jinx or Vi, because there was. So I don't know. That's my high level kind of analysis.
Well, I'll just add too. I became curious about the writing. Was there anything different about the writers or the writing room between seasons 1 and 2? And so I mapped out the writers of both seasons. And one thing that was interesting is that a lot of the writers are the same. Okay, so Nick Luddington, Alex Yee, Christian Link. These are a lot of the same. Amanda Overton. A lot of the same writers came back from season 1 to season 2. What was interesting and different about season 1, when they introduced the writers in the opening sequence, it said written by, Amanda Overton. Right underneath it in season 1, story by. It added that. So it was written by the writer. And then there was an overall story group, which was Christian Link, Alex Lee. I forgot one of them. And a gentleman named Ash Brannon. That was the big one. Ash Brannon. And there was another one there. Anyway, Ash Brannon's the most experienced writer of that group. He wrote Toy Story 2.
Oh, wow.
So this guy he worked with Disney Pixar in their heydays in the 90s and early 2000s. This guy knows his stuff. This guy's a slugger. He's a home run hitter. So now that I know that this guy was also involved in Arcane season 1, I could say that Ash Brannon wrote my favorite Toy Story and one of my favorite all-time television shows of all time. Ash Brannon was not part of season 2. He was one of the people that was not invited back. For whatever reason, I haven't done enough. Didn't have enough time to do the research to figure out what happened, or was it just an administrative decision? Was there a personality clash? I don't know. But it seems like his steady hand was missing in the guidance of this story. And it's possible, and this is just speculation, obviously, but Brianna, that maybe an experienced, heavy-hitting storyteller with experience could have come in there and kind of ironed out some of the wrinkles you're talking about, maybe organized the story in a way that would have been coherent and more satisfying, or said something like, I noticed you put in zombie female, like, white droids in here. Can we take those out? Why don't we take those out and focus on character? Like just something like that. It's amazing what happens in those writers' rooms when you have someone guiding stories like that. So I just want to throw that out there. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up for a pretty good long while, is I want Brianna's gonna lay out 3 major topics, and then at some point after that, I have put together something a little special for tonight's discussion. It's something that's been on my mind for at least a decade, and I finally started organizing these thoughts, and I'm calling them destabilizing story elements. These are things that when you introduce them into the story, they will destabilize your story. That doesn't mean they're going to ruin your story, because every single one of these elements has been used successfully, and in some cases, incredibly successfully, to tell some great stories. But there's a trick to it. So I'm going to share how many destabilizing story elements Arcane Season 2 employed, which is staggering, and also that they did not do anything to offset these destabilization things. And that's why you end up getting almost incoherent. When you string them together, it becomes incoherent. So I'll share that with you guys. It should be a fun discussion.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be kind of fun, especially with other experienced writers here in the panel.
Before we go to Brianna, I was just going to bring this up because I just saw this and I posted it into the Discord server and to everybody that this in the chat is in the our text chat, then on the Discord server. I saw this article. It says that Arcane co-creator vows we will learn from it after fan frustrations. The Netflix show's rushed final season. Exclusive. We're making this for an audience of people, not just for ourselves. And because I was wondering, because I was rather critical as well. But I saw that obviously a lot of people loved this season 2, which is really important to recognize. And I was even thinking about, okay, so what can we learn from what was done here? Because obviously a lot of people like it. I was part of the group. Doug was too. It was okay. Things were going wrong. But there were a lot of other people like that saw that, and like when I was on Reddit, if you search the Arcane Reddit subreddit by controversial, it's basically people saying a lot of the things that Doug and I were saying. I felt like so they were out there. That it's not the downvoted people, it's not the completely downvoted. Like but the controversial. What's the most controversial things that were said? And so there was a vocal group that was saying a lot of these kinds of things. And I thought that the response here was that the Christian Link says he understands and respects Arcane's fans' complaints over its rushed second season. The show's co-creator admits that some of the issues are a symptom of the show's 2-season format. Link added, it's always nice. I'm sorry?
I said, I agree. I think it should have been 3 seasons, as I'll get to in a second.
Link added, it's always 100%. Nice to have more to develop a show that everyone loves.
Well, the good news is Arcane Season 1 is sitting there waiting for us anytime.
It is there anytime. But the other major thing, he does say, I think that part of the issue is a symptom of Arcane being 2 seasons long, Link added. I don't know if fans would have had that feeling if it wasn't for Season 1 having a slower pace. But it's a learning for those of us who are making this stuff and we want to learn from it. I don't want to make something that's jarring, so this is part of the learning process. The specific quote I was looking for. Oh no, there's this specific quote right here. It says, for people who tuned in to watch season 2, having loved season 1, I can see how they could have been disappointed because there's a specific pace and a specific way we did things in season 1. Yeah, we changed it for season 2. We wanted to do things a little bit differently in season 2. So yeah, I understand that, I respect that, and I want to learn from that. That's one of the most honest things that I have seen any kind of like showrunner or something say in a long time. It's an acknowledgement of this particular group of fans. Like I said, maybe the minority, it may be the controversial, view, but man, that was so nice to me that we're kind of used to hearing if there's a group of people who don't like a show, that means that there's something wrong with them or something.
They have character flaws.
Who didn't like this, there was something that was wrong with them. And so
it must just mean they're racist and sexist. And,
right. And so I thought this was a great statement. So yeah, I mean, I don't, and this right that I have no interest in hating something or being, or whatever. So I thought that was a fantastic acknowledgement that there is this. So this might be some of the more the controversial take on Arcane here. that Doug and I have been expressing. Well, and also James Bacon and Sable Phoenix as well. But
I think as time
I
goes
love that
on, you'll
dialogue
hear.
with the creator.
Yeah, I think as time goes on, the critics of this will start to slip out there because this was really heavily front loaded. I know, man, like IMDb, 20,000 tens popped up there like overnight, and it was like, man, according to IMDb, this is the highest rated show of all time, the greatest season of television in the history of mankind, according to IMDb. And I'm like, there's definitely no way that's true. And then when I went on to YouTube, all the influencers were saying positive things. When I went on to look for articles, I was like, okay, this is giving me some Rings of Powers vibes here. Like it's all positive everywhere, all the time.
I've got a theory as to why that is. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. Well, and by the way, that doesn't mean that people weren't really enjoying it, didn't really feel this way. It just seemed excessive from my experience. And so I think as time goes by, the people will soften their position and slowly admit that there were some things that weren't quite right. And I think eventually season 2 will be seen as a very flawed effort. But does that mean that Arcane is dead? No. Season 1 is so good that if you make 8 more seasons, I will return for all 8. So
let's go to
that out there. Keep it going.
Yeah, I think.
Chat.
Go
ahead, Brianna.
Go ahead, if I can just say this real quick to respond to him, because I think it's because season 1 was so strong, specifically in getting people invested in the characters and emotionally, that it's one of those things where it's like people are they're feeling so strongly about it that almost anything they get, they're going to react to.
Right.
So I think that's some of that is definitely. I'm not saying that to say that like people aren't genuinely enjoying it, but I think that's contributing to people's ability to enjoy it, is that they've been so well primed by season 1, and just like so hungry for the emotional payoffs. That's like anything you get, it's like emotions. So I think that's really a big part of what's driving that.
Yeah, and I don't want to take that away from anybody. I don't want to take that away from it. It's fun to be a part of a franchise that's red hot, right? It's fun. You're part of a community. You go online and everyone's into it. It was fun to discover that everyone in the world loved Arcane as much as I did. I loved finding that out. So it is heartbreaking when they can't sustain it. And I'm always forgiving the writers, because I always think you're one good story away from bringing it all back, by the way. So.
All right, so the Titter Pig Rancher for $10 got 2 super chats. Then we'll turn it over to Brianna. Says too many characters were written to swing away from their trajectories in season 1, and then halfway through season 1 swing back towards those original arcs without fully committing either way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, shifting character motivations is a bizarre thing. Specifically with franchise writing of existing characters.
It's 2 seasons crammed into 1 season. That's why I think it feels that way.
Yeah, season 1 was a breakneck pace, Titter Pig says. Yet it never felt rushed. Season 2 is actually telling us less, but feels more rushed, which is a testament to abandoning the structure that made season 1 so memorable.
Well,
I kind of agree with that. That there's less meaning. I felt less meaning, overall. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this: one of the secrets about writing, and this was one of my favorite things. And it's something once you learn it, you have to relearn it over and over and over again. Writing is about relationships. A character's relationship to their setting, a character's relationship to other characters, a character's relationship to their culture. So every time I'm writing, what you're trying to describe is that space in between your character and a place, a person, a thing, a time, a culture. That's what you're building out when you're writing. And that's what people respond to. They respond to the relationships in between, all that invisible stuff in between, all the physical stuff. That's really where the magic is. And I think when you hear people say it's character driven, what I think they're really saying is character driven because we see that one character's relationship to all these other things. And then when you shift to another character, you see that character's relationship to all these other things. So that is a secret sauce in writing. Great stories have this, and they build that out really well. And Arcane was almost a masterclass in multiple overlapping relationship status with everything. Your relationship to the magic, Hextech, your relationship to Piltover, relationship to Zon, relationship to the council, relationship to this character, that character. It was all about relationships. And this one, they really lost that. And I felt that was one of the critical swings and misses.
All right. Go for it, Brianna. You're on deck.
Yeah, so I'll just say, I think I'll just go ahead and tell people what my 3 topics are going to be. So first, I'm just going to go through in a little bit more detail what my critiques are of season 2. And I'll mention a few things that I liked, but yeah, I'll go into a little bit more detail. And then I'm going to put forth a possible solution for like a different way that it could have been structured that I think would have fixed a lot of things. It's not like I sat there and like spent, hours and hours and like made, so it's my first draft.
Sure.
But just as a creative exercise to show like some possible ways it could have been different. And then third, I'm going to talk about one thing that I think really did work, and I'm going to bring the queer perspective and talk about the relationship, the lesbian relationship and why it matters on like a pop culture level. So it's a little bit different. But I wanted to bring that up in the discussion because there's some storytelling elements to that. So I will go ahead and I'm pulling up my notes again. I've got them on my phone next to my laptop. So just briefly, I'll talk about the episodes of the final act real quick. Like Heath was saying, episode 7 was really strong, and I think part of the reason why was because they weren't getting that one wasn't getting into a lot of the issues that I'll mention in season 2, where it was like too much stuff going on. Like they're able to focus and just tell a story about a few characters, and really, it was a contained story. It kind of made me think of like, if any of you guys watched The Last of Us?
No, but I've heard good things about it.
That's another like master.
Wait a second. Is that the one with the fungal zombies?
Yep, that's a fantastic video game adaptation. Really, really good. Those video games are a really good story. But that one has a one-off episode in there that's like a contained story, and it's so good. It's so good. And so I think that's part of the element is like, because it's its own contained story, it has a full arc, and and they were able to really deliver the emotions on that one as well. It was focused. In other words, it was focused. And then 8 through 9, it was just like too much going on. Like they introduced a whole bunch of new elements in the final act of the show. And there was a lot of disproportional time spent with characters we weren't as emotionally invested in. Those were the 2 things that I think were like the big problems. Because it was just like, what story is happening right now? Like we're set up to experience certain things, and then we're just shifting gears all of a sudden. So that was just big picture stuff that stood out to me on the individual episodes. Okay, so one of the things that is kind of an overarching critique is we have I felt like in season 2, especially in the last act, and you guys were kind of saying this a little bit in the last discussion. I think it was in the first act. The video game source is very clear, and not necessarily in a good way. I mean, it's in good and bad ways, but it's like, I felt like, especially in the final act, they spent a lot of time making these characters cool, but it was like mostly visual flourishes, rather than being like emotionally earned, like driven by character change. Like there was some element of that, but like especially Mel was one that really bothered me a lot. Like her, she had a really interesting transformation. It was, visually beautiful. Same thing with Victor. Like it was a really cool like transformation they went through. But there wasn't, especially with Mel, there wasn't very much like emotional / character driven motivation behind that change. So for example, I think there was a little bit more within Victor, because we have themes about his character, the character arc he's going on, about, playing with power and how we can use power for good, and how it can, corrupt basically. And, so there's stuff like that that's playing into his transformation. It's there a little bit. With Mel, and I don't know if I was just missing something, but it felt like her magic kind of came out of nowhere. Like I didn't see how it fit into her character arc and out of her, wounds and her backstory. She had all that. She was a really great character. Like what was the need that this magic fulfilled? In other words, you know what I mean? Like that's how like a transformation plays into a character's arc. Yeah, I would like, how does it work into a character wounds, objectives? So I'm curious if I watch it again, if I will see that there is something there, but it was too subtle for me to be able to pick up on it as a viewer. The phrase "this isn't earned" kept running through my mind, like in that final act, with a lot of this stuff.
I agree. I'll say I will agree with you that Mel also bothers me. I just saw. We'll get to you in just a moment. Zero the Blade. I see that, but yeah, she was with the $10 super chat. But yeah, she was siloed off, which meant that I really didn't care about her art for a while. Okay, but on the greater part, when we are introduced to Mel in season 1, she is the politician. She's talking about investments.
That's what I was about to get to. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I love Mel.
That's what her character is focused on.
She changed the archetypes.
Yeah, she did.
Correct.
Exactly. So like I thought that if you're going to have her beat her mother, if that's we can talk about her mother's arc, whatever. But if that's where you're going, that she's going to have to overcome her mother. Her mother is the warrior archetype. She was supposed to be the politician, and I would have said that she needed to politically outmaneuver her mother, whatever, and that's how she would win and play to her strengths. The idea that all of a sudden she's got magic powers and needs to defeat her mother in hand-to-hand combat with flashy magic. That's
hero's journey stuff, man.
Yeah, it actually made her less cool because it was like what made her so unique and interesting as a character was the fact that she wasn't using those types of things. She wasn't a combat character.
Yeah, she was genuinely cunning. And what would have been cool is if you had, and we'll get into the tactical situation of that final battle, because that's another hang up I've been having, not with just this show. It's becoming a real problem. People are losing their ability to write a tactical battle sequence. But what would have been cool is if she at least was an advisory level where she's like, look, I know the strategies of Noxus. I understand how she's going to fight. I know the assets she's going to employ. I understand things about how my mom fights. And advising, let's say, a military tactician who's like, okay, then what we should probably do is this and this, that, and that. And then, it's her versus her mother intellectually, strategically. That would have been so much more satisfying, especially if her mother makes a single mistake in that battle and Mel's right there. She called, I read your book.
That would have been cool. That would have been earned. That would have been consistent with what was set up for her.
And I was like, because when I was watching Mel cast spells and stuff, I was like, everybody in the show doesn't need to end up being a badass warrior. I mean, there are other things you can do.
Because they're video game characters, so they felt
because they're video game.
I know, but so my first thought was not everybody has to end up like that, and I was like, oh, this is. I mean, instantly the follow-on thought is, oh, I bet they're all like this in the video game, and so they had to get to the video game part. So
because I'm a non-video game guy. I'm a non-League of Legends guy. If I ended up buying League of Legends because I love this show so much and I hop down to the video game and there's Mel and she's a mage, I don't think I would care. I wouldn't question it that much. I'd still be cool playing her as a mage, even though in the show she's not. You don't have to make direct translations. That's just my opinion, though. Video game people might feel very differently.
What is the send for $10? Thank you very much, Zero the Blade. Zero the Blade for $10 says the rewrite the staff went through with season 2 was caused by a problem that had 20% chance of happening. Why it went downward could be summed up in one sentence. Well, let us know what that is. Let us know what
did he see anything right after that?
Yeah, when people have their multiple comments, it gets lost. It's like,
I don't see anything. Well, I'll tell you, Zero, you sound like you know some of the background stuff.
Yeah.
I've just started dipping my toe in that pool. That's how I found out about, Ash, Brandon. I found out which writers came back and which ones didn't. And to me, it sounds like that guy was very instrumental in keeping that story on point for season 1.
Well, and Jacob says Mel isn't the league champion.
Yeah, see, now that's really interesting. I thought I heard that, and so that makes it even worse because it's like
not a video game character.
She wasn't originally a video game character. So like, why did they feel the need? I don't know if they were planning to introduce her or something. I wonder if there was like some sort of executive that was like, you must make her a video game character so we can add it.
She is just by being in the show. She has brand recognition for any of us, like me. noob, 512 coming in. If I see Mel, I'll still play her. I don't care. I mean, it's Mel. She's in the show. So you don't have to. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, and it's like storytelling needs to come first in a context like this, and so
yeah. Well, and I think Arcane was a perhaps the success story of creating something new and compelling purely for storytelling reasons, even if it wasn't perfectly matched to the lore of the video game. And I don't know if that's true or not. People who know the lore might correct me immediately, but it seemed like Arcane, the season 1 show, was its own thing, that was loosely based on this video game. That's what it seemed like to me.
Yeah, they've retroactively said that Arcane is now canon, but that has I think created some issues. I think some of the fans are like, "What?" But that's not.
Well, that's what those video
don't
game
worry
guys.
about that other canon that used to exist. No, this is canon now. I think that's what I've heard the tone is. People are like, "Okay."
Interesting. I ran across that on accident in a Reddit thread. Something what you just said sounds familiar.
Yeah. I think I've probably heard it on Facebook. I'm always
so we're with you on Mel. And it sounds like a lot of people on the. So I said we're with you on Mel. So we were with you on. Mel.
Yeah. And so on that topic of video game characters being cool and it not being earned, I have one exception to that, and that is Mbessa. So she remained genuinely cool throughout the season, and it's because her coolness comes from who she is, not from whatever physical power, magic ability she has. I think about that moment. This is in Act 2 where what's his name? The dad that turned into a monster. I forget what it's called, Warwick, whatever. When that monster is coming to the prison, and you see that that cart that's coming, and it's all broken, and she turns and she's like, and we don't see the fight. Well, we just see her, take out her weapon and stand there ready. That was a moment where it's just she's so cool. But why is she cool? It's not just because she's competent. It's also because she's, she has all these interesting character traits. She's stoic, she's self-confident, she's determined, self-controlled, and competent. And all that together, that drives so much of her behavior. And
but she was also kind of delightfully villainous when she was introduced. She had her local cuisine boy toy,
Yes.
When she had that interaction with Jay, she was in the tub and her knees were wide apart. She gets that because they actually say nudity is a power move. So getting out of that tub and walking up it's a power move. So it's
she made him uncomfortable while she's completely unbothered.
Yeah. And so she was delightfully villainous, and you're like, oh, this chick is playing all these power moves. I liked her immediately, and I thought she was such a great power character, and I felt she was okay in season 2. She had her moments for sure, but man, did not stick the landing with her. Unfortunately,
she started strong in Act 1. It seemed like a lot of us were, and myself included, were like, oh, they're setting her up really well to be a villain. Yeah. Hey, Charlie.
Yeah.
So the Tedder Pig for $5 says Arcane was treated as its.
Never mind. Go ahead.
Arcane was treated as its own self-contained entity in season 1. They should have stayed with that for season 2. That's why it was the best video game adaptation.
Yeah. I think people could love both together and both independently with that structure.
Yeah. So what I was saying there is that the principle to take away is that if you have a character who does have, some really neat combat skill or a magic power or whatever, that in of itself does not make them interesting. It only becomes sort of epic and awe-inspiring when it is connected to their character growth. There's something that they go through a great journey and they change as a person, and then they get their power, or the power, basically what I'm saying, it emphasizes their character.
Well, and I would even argue
it doesn't do any work on its own. It's only there to emphasize the storytelling and the character change.
Yeah, and everything you just said, I would also add, not argue, that the combat style becomes a form of self-expression that matches the character's personality. And there's something about that we love. So when Luke's going like this and Vader's, like this, their personalities are on display in the way they fight. There's something there about that. And you could tell who's the more experienced and who's on offense, who's on defense, who's got some flair and flamboyancy, and who's a cold-hearted. there's a lot in combat. And so I do think it's not the combat itself. It's still, like Brianna said, is rooted in that character.
Absolutely.
We have a super chat from somebody new.
Oh,
awesome.
Revafi for $5. Thank you and welcome to the channel. Here's to you. Get a drink here.
Right
I
on.
was going to pour myself a drink. I'll do it if we take a break.
Here's to you. Revafi says it's really weird that there was such a quality shift from season 1 to season 2 when one of the heads of the show said season 2 script was finished before season 1 aired.
Mhm.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
I've read that too. I've seen
So
people.
there was a
I've
script
seen
for
some back
season
and forth.
2 front loaded?
Yep, they have the whole
Well,
thing
that's-
playing. Not only that, I think by the time season 1 came out, they had already recorded a lot of the dialogue, if I recall correctly. Like they were, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have any inside information on that, and I've seen different people say different things on that, and also get different interpretations of what, like, the showrunners or whatever said exactly about what it meant for the story to have been finished. I don't know if it was aired. Like I don't know if I saw aired. I mean, you might have. I have no inside information, but like that before season 1 was finished with production, they already had the season 2 scripts of where they were going or something. And that does, I don't know. So I don't know exactly what that situation is, but I would really love to know and have some additional information on that, if only for the reason of understanding the business and show production side of things. Yeah. Because I noticed on this subject, I noticed Brianna, when we were talking, I noticed a couple of things that we have talked about, had a different opinion on, that had to do with introducing things or seeding things in earlier seasons or movies. Yeah, or early, and you seem to be of the opinion that, well, hold on, it wasn't introduced because we didn't need it yet. Like whether or not that, like in Arcane, whether the hex tech is in the ventilation systems of Zon.
Well, only because I think of a season as an individual story. So
well,
I don't
that's
think
exactly what I
but
know exactly. And so that's a fundamental difference between, I think one of the reasons why we had disagreements on that is because your analysis was season as story, whereas a lot of times I will look at this as a multiple season arc.
You're both right.
It depends on, but there's probably a major limitation to what you can do. Like, if your scripts are your season 1 is finished and now you start season 2, you may realize you need things that were not introduced in season 1.
But it's like having multiple books in a series. Like each book is its own story. And so it wouldn't make sense to introduce something in book 1 that you aren't going to encounter until book 2, because it would feel like you're planning something that isn't paying off. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll tell you,
you can still do it, but you have to do it in a really subtle way where it feels like it matters for the first one.
Well, it should feel like it matters, and because I've done that. There's things I put in.
Yeah, that's why I went. Wait a minute. I mean, I've done that, but
yeah,
I made it matter for the first.
Yeah,
one.
there's things I have in book 1 that already. Now, the way it's set up is that they're like Easter eggs. If you ever go back and reread it, you'll be like,
only notice it by reading
oh,
it.
he put it right here. It's right here. Oh, he knew what he was doing the whole time. So there's these little Easter eggs that I've set up. But if it's pivotal to the plot and you introduce it in one season, you're going to have to reintroduce it again in season 2 or the next season. You're going to have to redo that because it should be self-sufficient as well. And I also think, and Brianna, I'm sure you agree, that the skill of the writer should be able to build off of a season without having to go back and change the story that's already existing. I think a good writer can build off what's there.
Easier said than done.
It is easier said than done. I won't argue that.
I think that Bacon takes your side, Brianna, but I think this is going to be dependent on what so you win. But I think it's going to be dependent on what the story is. But there are also constraints on the actual physical production of the show that are going to influence that too.
Yeah, which is very interesting.
That's why I would be interested to know more about when the season 2 scripts were made, just from the production perspective. So when were these?
Just picking up,
that would be interesting.
Just picking up a few comments, going back and forth in the chat. It sounds like Riot really interfered with this and kind of threw some monkey wrenches into this process. And sounds like they're the culprit for Riot's Arcane. Yeah, there was a few. Yeah, it sounds like Riot got in the way of this. too much studio interference.
Yeah, that's always what happens is too much studio. Yeah, it's always intriguing to try to learn more about the process behind the scenes, because I feel like it's so often that there's some sort of a story or a movie, a show, whatever it is, when it starts to go off the rails, it's because of something in production, something systematically didn't work, and yeah, and so even if you have really skilled writers, if they're not able to do their job and they're not able to go through the whole process of making a good story, if something else interferes with that, you can still have lesser quality than those creators would be capable of producing. So
yeah.
So it's hard to be like, mad or judgmental as a creator, because I understand that can happen, and I know that it could happen to me.
Yeah, good.
I hope not, but it's possible.
All right,
we got
okay. So
continue on. So that was that was the whole topic of the video game source is very clear, both in good and bad ways. Okay, so another critique. This I kind of already said this, but basically, I felt that the season overall had a lot of genuinely cool elements individually, but structurally, I think it's a mess. Everything feels like it's in the wrong order from a storytelling perspective, and I'll get into that more when I talk about.
I really want to hear that. Yeah.
It doesn't seem like the writers knew what plot they wanted to tell in particular. It was like they kept changing their minds. So they would set something up, play with it for a little while, not fully deliver on that, and then set something else up, play with that a little while.
Totally.
Rinse and repeat. And so it was this kind of jarring, wait, what is the plot? What is the main conflict of this season? And what is the main theme? Even that got muddled. I felt like it seemed like, season one, it was very clear, what kind of story we're telling, what kind of a story we're what is it that we're trying to say? We talked before about the idea of, can a monster be saved? This season up through acts 1 and 2 felt like it was kind of dealing with that theme again, and maybe that it was changing its answer.
Act 2,
yeah. Yes. And then by act 3, it was I don't know anymore what the question is. It felt like the theme got muddled. And so it was just kind of not a cohesive story. It's kind of multiple stories. Specifically, all of the new elements should have been set up in the first act. Ideally in the first episode.
Well, absolutely.
Yes. If you're going to be introducing new, if you are taking the position that a season is a story, which I would say that's going to vary depending on the particular TV show. So I think, but okay, but let's say you were writing it so that each season is its own story. Then one of the things that I've come back to that I still feels really right is that don't add more things after 50% of the way through. So
absolutely not.
So if season 2 is its own story, then you're right. Yeah, you need to be setting it up in act 1.
100%.
Don't be adding new stuff in act 3 that's going to be relevant to the resolution of the plot.
And that's evidence of bad writing or studio interference leading to bad writing. But at the end, it's bad writing.
Yeah, and it's on a high level, right? So it's a structural this. They need to spend more time, like I've said before, in that stage. What order do these things happen? It was like that. It felt like that part got rushed for some reason. All right, we need to write these scripts. It could have been one of those sorts of situations. It's no, we need to spend more time getting the story right. So we're primed for this big conflict between Zahn and Piltover, right? That's what we felt like was going to be the main conflict.
That was the leave of season 1.
Yep. But we dealt with that for a little bit. But then the climactic sequence is a completely different conflict. I'm not the first person to say this on the internet, but that's just a fundamental, you become not as emotionally invested because you've been primed to care about this particular conflict. And then we just kind of, now we're on this conflict. It's I wanted to know about this conflict. I've been spending my time with this. Just kind of, that was when I recognized I was emotionally disconnected, was when I was we're not, the plot has changed.
Yeah, inexplicably.
I would expand on that point by saying that we've talked about what does scale or scope mean in storytelling, and and I thought this was a perfect example of this. That as an exercise, what's the smallest possible story that you can tell that is absolutely still emotionally gripping. That we're talking about when you're talking about the scale or scope of a story, you're like, this is going to happen in the story, or may happen in the story, or may not happen in the story because of the protagonist's actions, and it's incredibly fundamentally meaningful in their life. Like that whatever this is going to have, like, and I was saying that, like, could we tell a story? And I still want to try this as an example. I started, but I haven't gotten away from it. Like a child's stuffed animal toy being taken from them. And that's extremely small scale. But are they going to get this stuffed animal back? Can they, whatever? Like, that's everything in their world. So
I lost my favorite stuffed toy when I was a child. So I'm like, yes, of course, that's emotionally. I lost it at a movie theater while I was watching 102 Dalmatians. It's a core memory.
Oh my God.
Anyway,
oh my God. So yeah,
yes,
so right, that's it.
Yeah.
No, I love it because that connects it. That's a very small stake story in the grand scheme of the world or the galaxy or the multiverse. But it means everything to you and that character. I mean, I can't imagine if I lost my stuffed animals, right? Yeah, right, whatever. What would that have done? But but right. So the character, you could have kept the story about Zahn and Piltover. They should have that be very emotionally investing, but I felt like they need to blow up. No, wait a minute. We got to blow up the scale, just meaning like the whole universe is at stake and the whole timelines. And now we got a multiverse. And so they ratcheted up the scale on the physical level. And we're expecting that to carry the day. And that reminds me of things that happen in things like Marvel movies and the comic books. Because, after you've gone to Endgame, they did a fantastic job, I think, up through Endgames, scaling that. And then now every movie has to be about the stakes or the multiverse. We're about to blow up the entire galaxy or whatever. And that's what it felt like here to me, that we were going to a high physical stake where the emotional stakes and where the impact of the story was on Zahn and Piltover.
Again,
does that make sense? I explained that one.
Evidence of bad writing.
That I didn't know we were going to, the transhumanism critique. And actually, I don't like to use the word cringe because now it's cliche, and even saying cringe is cringe. But there was actually one time in this when I was like, oh my God, and I cringed at the dialogue. And you guys are much bigger on the dialogue than I am. But when Jace was trying to make his argument in the council chamber or whatever, and he goes, "This is going to be a battle for humanity." And I was like, "Oh, please!" Like,
you forgot he leads off with, "There's a storm coming." I was like, "What? You just wrote in the script, there's a storm coming?" That was cliche, like the
dialogue.
I noticed it when he was like, "It's a battle for humanity," and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Some of my award-winning dialogue.
That's just ratcheting up the.
Yeah, that was something Doug was saying previously. You were talking about how some of the dialogue was bothering you, and you said something about how like it felt like there was another pass that hadn't happened or something like that. Like it felt like kind of a first or second draft of dialogue.
Right.
I feel like that's another area that it seems like maybe in the development something didn't happen. There was some sort of another step of polishing, like the like dialogue, just like specific. So it seems like there was something missing in the stage really early in the writing and also way at the end that it felt like maybe got rushed in the process. Cause I was sensing there was I didn't notice it as much in the earlier acts. Like it just wasn't standing out to me as much. Only that one I think that I noticed, like, oh, it's kind of purple.
There was it
was standing out to me a lot more in the final act. And I think it was because I was less emotionally connected to the story. So I was like, I wasn't able to forgive it as easily.
I remember going, what? But then I forgot. And then I was rewatching and I caught it. So this time I wrote it down. It was in episode 8. Vi wakes up. She's at Kate's house or mansion or whatever. And she goes and confronts Kate about Jinx being arrested. And she's like, how long were you sidled up with that shifty, self-serving war pig? She oinked poison in your ear and you just ate it. And I literally hit pause. I was like, did I hear that right? So, I mean,
that's something someone would write in like a Facebook comment.
My God.
Something someone would say in dialogue.
What's weird is the oinking goes into the ear and she just ate it. I want to know how you eat something that's in your ear. Like it just, everything about that line was just awful. And I was like, oink the boy. Even the alliteration, the oi and oinked and the oi and poison. I was like, nobody caught the, anyway. I'm ranting.
I'm gonna have to pay much more attention to all that because the dialogue you guys were all on. But I did pick up on the
that's definitely something that. And by the way, as a writer, we've all done this. We've all
for sure, and like there's no judgment there. Like but it just it
should have been caught.
Had some more another pass basically,
right?
Or two.
Right, you have an idea in your head. You think the dialogue is clever, and then on repeat or when someone reads it, they're like oinked poison. You're like, oh yeah.
Well, I would suggest an area of caution is if you think your dialogue is clever, you should take a second look because dialogue is not supposed to be clever.
Right.
Dialogue is supposed to be natural. If you're writing, I don't know, like a speech or something that can be clever.
Totally correct.
Poetry that can be clever, but it's like dialogue. Dialogue should be accurate to the character and to the moment.
Clever wording is usually bad.
A bad sign. I mean, in all fairness, dialogue is it's a little bit better than how we speak in day-to-day life.
It has to be that.
It's basically like if you had your dialogue and then you got to edit it. If you spoke and then you got to edit yourself, that's what dialogue is like.
Right. Yeah, like I've tried to even write authentic where you add ums and stuff.
No,
that's bad writing too. You want to get that out of there.
But it's like it's also dialogue is also I've heard it described as like you're in the shower thinking about that argument you had with someone yesterday. You're like, oh, I wish I said.
You should have
said, you said that.
It should be refined.
Yeah,
but feel spontaneous.
Exactly. So it's a really delicate balance. I mean, dialogue is genuinely one of the hardest things to learn to write. Something that writers should spend a lot of time on. And
I'll get to something I call ambiguous.
Become okay.
there is something called ambiguous dialogue, which I'll get to later in the destabilizing thing. How you can write a line of dialogue that seems to make sense, but when you stop and think, it's all just fluff. It's just made up ambiguous words.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do super chats, and then we'll go to Brianna. Continue with Brianna. So the Titter Pig Rancher says season is story, but you must keep the same characters where they left off and continue any previous season storylines, or else it's just another show. Good point. Yeah.
There should be a through line on some level. Characters can change completely dramatically. Anakin becomes the hero of the Jedi Order, becomes the Dark Lord of the Empire. So characters can change, but we have to see that happen. We have to understand that on some level, or you get an immediate change, and then we find out later how the change happened. You could do it, out of sequence storytelling. But what you can't do is, and I'll get into this later too, character shifts. All the writers out there, this was a big one for me because I found out all my old writing was riddled with character shifts, not character changes. Big difference.
Zero the Blade for $5. Thank you very much. Says the fans accidentally caused it by forcing the key character of Hextech to be written out.
What do you mean by that, Zero Blade? The fans
they forced out a character.
If you don't mind, tell us in the chat what you mean. Who is the key character of Hextech to be written out?
The Titter Pig Rancher for $10 says, this is why Civil War is the best Marvel movie, drilling down from the bigger conflict to the personal one instead of the escalation to the worldwide threat. Arcane season 1 was personal. Season 2 no longer was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the kind of example I often give about what makes conflict interesting is it's like, or a cliffhanger or something like that. It's like, okay, here's an example. Someone is about to die and they're surrounded by enemies. Oh no, will they survive? And you end your chapter there. You don't care. Of course they're going to survive. They're the main character. Like, that's not interesting. But then you could have something really small and simple and intimate. Like, husband arrives, gets home, and then he finds evidence on his wife's computer that she's been lying to him about something, really important. She's not who she says she is. And then you hear the door open. The key,
that's it.
And you change then you in the chapter. Now that's a cliffhanger because it introduces all these questions like, oh my God, are they going to have a conversation about it? Is he going to hide it? Is he going to, blah, blah, blah. It just, and it's intimate, right? It's just about like there's a relationship that we can understand, or, two people are.
It's not predictable.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, there's going to be a war. Someone is, let's say, let's say someone is trying to overthrow a throne. Okay, that's cool. That's epic. It's not that interesting though. But it would be a lot more interesting if the person on the throne was his brother, right? And now they're estranged because he's the crown prince, but then he thinks he's a better ruler. This guy's a tyrant. Now it's interesting because it's intimate and it can still be epic. But once the epic is also intimate, now that's when you get peace.
And even better if the queen told the brother to do it because she
right. Right. Let's write the story, guys.
Okay, hold on. Here's what Scar. Here's Zero. I think this is Zero the Blade answering the question.
Yeah, I think it is too. Skarner was the reason Hextech was brought into Runeterra. His whole story is about turning Jace into Swiss cheese. You really need someone to fact check you real time, Doug.
Uh-oh.
But these aren't.
I don't think I said something factually incorrect. I think I was saying that. I don't know what I was saying, but what did I say that was
I don't know what the
unfactual?
context is.
But we don't know.
Yeah.
That,
Well, I was asking you to
I'm
clarify, not because I was calling you out. I was curious to see what had gotten written out.
Because I mean that's interesting from the development of the show perspective, but which is interesting. But at the end of the day, we're just talking. We are largely talking about, or I'm only talking about what I've seen on the screen because I don't know anything about all of these.
Well, Zero the Blade. Maybe you mean fact assist. Everyone can, I don't mind being fact assisted if there's something about Riot Games or the lore that I don't know. I would love people to chime in and help me out.
But I feel strong. Like we're talking about that. I feel strongly that the story has to stand on what we're presented, not.
Yeah.
And that's the way I'm looking at it. Does this work with what we were presented with on screen?
Yeah,
right. And that's fundamental. That's fundamental with storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So my final thing to say, just on my topic of general critiques, I remembered I had forgotten about this, but I remembered it while I was watching Act 3, the final act of the show. That when I was watching season 1, I had gotten a little bit worried that it had too many elements, too many characters. I was like, oh, how are they going to be able to tell a cohesive story with all of these things? And eventually I was like, oh, they gained my trust. And it was fine. And it seemed like they were handling it well. Unfortunately, I think ultimately it is true that they had too many elements, too many characters, at least for 2 seasons. Yeah, if they were going to do this as a 2-story season, I think they should have cut down on characters and plot elements. Or if they wanted to tell a story that had all of these things, they needed to extend it. I mean, that's kind of what a lot of people feel. Some people have suggested they should have added, they should have just made season 2 longer. I really think it should have been 2 seasons from a structural perspective, but I mean, total of 3. I'm saying season 2 should have been 2 seasons. But either way, it's just they just didn't have enough time to follow through on everything that they set up. Yeah. So
Agreed.
I'm gonna take it. I actually am getting dehydrated and so I'm gonna go get some water. I'll be right back, and then I'll go to my suggested solution.
Okay. All right. Go for it. Grab some drink.
Awesome.
There we go. Okay. So the Titterpig Rancher says, not predictable being the cliffhanger. Not predictable being the cliffhanger is why the end of season 1 is not a cliffhanger. It's entirely predictable from everything they have been set up before the rocket hits the council chamber. And Druden Fuzz says exactly, I was so confused by people calling it a cliffhanger. I like what you just said, Doug. Less of a cliffhanger, more of a game changer.
Whoever wrote that, that's a great comment. Who is that guy?
So, right. And I think that's why a lot of us even though a lot of us wanted to see what happened next, we said, okay, so what happens next after that? That was the end of a story because that was the end of the arc. That answered the question about, who is Powder? Is she Powder? Is she Jinx? Can she be redeemed? Can she be saved? Boom.
Well, and it was in line with the conflict they set up. They had from episode 1, season 1, they established the conflict between Piltover and Zaun. That there was a form of class warfare going on. That there was the haves and the have-nots, and there was corruption kind of mixing them together. And the Piltover had Hex Tech and Zahn had Shimmer, and there was this confrontation looming, and Silco was behind it. And so when she fires that missile, that's an irreconcilable, catastrophic collapse of whatever fragile truce existed between these two forces. So you're right. It's not a cliffhanger, but it just blows open this conflict. So now we still want to see what happens next, but it's not because we don't know what's going to happen. We want to see what the conflict is going to look like when these two forces clash.
Right. And then also when they bring, that's when I would say, okay, so what unifies them? Okay, it's this outside existential threat to the entire universe. Okay, well, yes, it's realistic that people unify when they have an outside threat. So that's why it works on a superficial level, whatever. Okay, that's what, but that didn't resolve any of their conflict. It just meant that we're going to ignore it for the time being because they have a common enemy. It didn't resolve any of the conflict that we had seen on screen. It just,
and it also muddled the theme, right? Because then it was like, well, what are we saying? Like, what are you as storytellers saying about these types of cycles of violence? I wasn't sure anymore by the end because they kind of stopped addressing it.
We were invested, I would say, in almost equal portions with Piltover and Zahn. I was partially invested in Piltover just as much as I was partially invested in Zahn. Piltover had this golden age of Hex Tech thing going, the City of Progress, and there was conflicts with this rush to technology and this rapid advancement. But in Zahn, there's these other issues that you cared about the people and you cared about their plight. So it was great to be equally invested, or at least close to equally invested. Even if I may have leaned more toward Zahn, I still felt like, well, but I kind of like some of the people in Piltover. I still care there. I would have loved to see it play out, and deal with whoever comes out, who wins. I'll deal with it, All
right. You want to continue, Brianna?
Okay. So here's my rough first draft of some potential suggested solutions. So I'm just looking at the show in general. Season 1, of course, we're leaving exactly as it is. It set up this conflict between Zahn and Piltover. So keep it all just as it is. Season 2 out of 3, should have been an entire season with that conflict. So that would just be the war between the top and the bottom. I want to see that. Yep. That is one plot thread, right? So so if we're telling one season as a story, we should have had a whole season just about that. And not only because that is one plot thread, but also because that is what we were primed to look forward to. And so we really needed to have a delivery on that. So I would have loved to see an entire season with Jinx and Vi on opposite sides of a war. Like we had one battle. We had one battle. I wanted to see an entire season of that. And so here's where now we're going to start getting into, I'm going to move elements around. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say about this creative exercise, I'm not changing anything. I'm not we're going to keep things like Mel having her magic, stuff like that. I'm just moving things around. So what if we had all the same elements, just restructuring it? Okay, so here, Vi and Caitlyn's relationship progresses. During this season, we see them kiss, we see them have sex. We very much see them together building a relationship. Meanwhile, we see Jinx, something I think one of you guys said last time, we see her become a leader and agent of chaos, right? But slowly over time, not just in one episode, we see, and not just off screen, we watch as she slowly changes her nature under the influence of the small kid, Isha. So, we have this kind of element of she's this badass leader of the rebels. She doesn't care about anyone. She's all hurt. She's not going to get close to anyone ever again. And then this little kid comes into her life reluctantly. She tries to push the kid away, but slowly we see her starting to shift her perspective. She says this thing in the current version in season 2 where she's like, ever since you came into my life, it's like I put on glasses and I can't tell if everything's blurry or clear. It's like, okay, don't just put that into a dialogue. Let's watch that happen. Let's watch her shift her perspective. So as that's happening,
right,
Jinx and Vi start to shift and how they see each other as Jinx is changing for the better and Caitlyn is changing for the worse, right? We start off very much like, Vi is just on Caitlyn's side, and then as she's becoming conflicted. We had basically a moment of that. I would have loved to see that expanded. Potentially, I'm unclear. I'm undecided on where to put the Vi's down. Moment where she goes off the rails. I could see her kind of getting lost here, like losing herself in the war, having her have that outpouring of violence in this context instead of with the pit fighter sequence. I'm undecided. I'll tell you another spot where I think that could go. But over time, we see through her interactions with a changing Jinx, Vi starts to find herself again. She starts to find that inner protector, that soft heart. And then throughout this also, Mel, we see her investigating some mystery related to the Black Rose, right? So this is like a that needs to be a whole plot thread, right? So her suspicion of her mother is slowly increasing, all this stuff, but it's all in this sort of context of politics. So I would want to end season 2 where I think roughly it's season 2, act 2. No, I forget which episode it is. Somewhere in the middle. It's kind of roughly in the middle right now of season 2. So we would end in my version, season 2, with the sisters finally reconciling over Vander, and put the Vi Caitlyn breakup here, not earlier, here. So this is when Vi changes sides, right? So she says there's a shift between those two. Caitlyn has gone full dictator, and those two are having a conflict in values. So Caitlyn goes too far, and those two become irreconcilable. Vi chooses her sister. And then right at the end here, that's where we put Mel's kidnapping. So she's been investigating something she gets into deep, and then it goes poorly. And we can hint at some of that big arcane magic stuff that's about to become bigger, because that was kind of how it was in the tone of season 1 of the show. It was a part of the story. It wasn't like overpowering, as it became in the act 3. And then I would suggest at the end of this version of season 2, end this part with Victor waking up. So we don't introduce any of his Messiah stuff yet, because that's a different plot.
Yeah.
You just take him out for a while and have, I don't know what Jace is doing. Well, we'll have Jace maybe be involved. Let's say Jace and Mel are together investigating the Rose. I don't know, something like that.
Which would make sense because they had developed a relationship in season 1, which didn't really get a whole lot of attention in.
Yeah, it didn't. Nothing
so
really
it would
happened.
make sense for Jace and Mel to be working together.
Yes.
On the on the first draft through this. Yeah, I mean, yeah. It would
right. And throughout all this, Mbessa's slowly getting power. That would play into what Mel and Jace are up to. And Caitlyn's, Caitlyn becoming more and more aligned on that end. All right, so there's my version of season 2. Any comments before I move forward? I just wanted to pause and.
No, that's much better than what we got. A little bit more steady with the pace and a little bit more character focused, with the character arcs being the reason for the pacing. So yeah, that would have been much better. And I think it's essential based on the ending of season 1 to have a Piltover versus Zahn conflict, a large scale confrontation between these two groups of people.
All right. So only in season 3 do we introduce this idea of an external conflict that can finally unite Zahn and Piltover. They have a common enemy. So here's how I would set this up. Okay, so entering season 3. So here's our first act of season 3. We introduce Caitlyn's rebound, like we saw, which is going to set up the later betrayal as currently written. And so if Vi doesn't have her dark moment earlier, we could put it here, just like how it was before. She's reacting to this breakup. And it will hit so much harder now because we've actually seen them together. We've seen them like fighting together, growing together. We see them have an entire relationship, and then they break up. Not this like, oh, we're not really dating yet. We're kind of like romantically interested in each other. The lesbian cliche moment. Like have them actually have a relationship, and then they break up. So then we can really buy the impact of that. And okay, so start the Messiah Victor storyline here. In this first act of season 3, this is when Jace, Echo, and Heimerdinger all get swept away. We see that like what is now episode 7. This should be like maybe episode 2 or 3, where we watch Echo have his, alternative experience in another, the other time. What do you call it? The other universe, where he gets his time power. Yep. So we're introducing this early on in this season. Jace gets all, he has his moment of, oh, the magic's evil, and he comes back and he tries to kill Victor, but this backfires. So now Victor is more powerful than ever before. So this is going to oh wait, sorry. Let me go back. I have some more things that are in the first act. So in the first act, Mel escapes her prison and gains her power, but perhaps she conceals it at first, because we want to still see her as the sneaky politician, right? So she's going to get close to her mother, regain her mother's trust, even as she plots against her. Sorry, I'm just reading my notes. Am I still in what I was saying would be the act 1? I think so. I don't know. So basically, all that stuff would have to, because those are all things that are being set up in the first act. So then, at some point here, we see Vi and Caitlin reconcile as Caitlin realizes she's been in the wrong, and Bessa is the true enemy, has been using her, etc. And so we can have that more earned by having a lot of time with that. And then here Caitlin joins the Undercity, right? So we're still having like a war between these two sides, but she joins, kind of like what we saw with that moment where she betrays Bessa, like have a moment like that, but here. And then this is something that would take a lot longer. Kate and Jinx also reconcile, but both of these characters have to wrestle with the harm they caused each other. The Undercity understandably does not like or trust Caitlin. She must earn their respect after being their dictator. This will take multiple episodes, I wrote, because it's like that would be really difficult. And that'd be really interesting, right? Like, it'd be some really interesting.
But good writing, you could do it. You could cross that bridge.
Right. And that would be really. See, this is the thing. I'm going to make a quick side rant, because this is the thing that actually bothers me the most about the ending of this show, because it's a personal big pet peeve of mine. Consequences, that's why I've been motivated to run my own corruption arc. If you're going to show a character, even if it's a character we love, who's going to go and do terrible things, you have to show consequences. And if you're going to redeem them, you can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to sacrifice myself, now I'm a hero. No, that's so lazy and cheap. Like, you have to show the impact of that. And I've just seen this so many times, like, it's all forgiven. It's like, is that how it works in the real world? Like, there are consequences for your
Not
actions.
really.
And it's so much more painful to go and then try to make it right. Like that's humbling. That's character change. If you're actually changing for the better, it means you're going to go and do hard work and trying to regain people's trust. And you might not succeed. You might do everything you can and still not get forgiveness. And that's just the fact. That's just the consequence of what you've done, right? I would have liked to see that kind of a thing explored in this show. You're about to say
and you can have redemption where there's a lot of stories that do this, where the person who needs to be redeemed, they don't survive, because like Darth Vader, had he lived, he would have been, executed. The rebellion would have been, hey man, thanks for killing the Emperor. How about all is forgiven? Right. I was thinking of Dangerous Liaisons too. He kind of did something unforgivable, and his solution was to allow himself to be killed in a duel while unmasking the quote Minotaur of the story and trying to reconcile. But he did it knowing he couldn't be forgiven. But in a way, there's a level of redemption there, right? So
I don't know if I really like those kinds of solutions, though. And maybe that's just a personal preference, but it
depends on the story.
I think it depends on the story. I think that's the problem. It's not that it can't work. I think it's that it happens so often that, to me, it's a cliche. Like, oh, the bad guy's redeemed. Okay, let's kill them. Like, that's what the writers instantly go to. And I'm like, I think it's more interesting if we don't, because we've seen that a million times. You know what I mean?
Well, it depends on the story. Yeah.
Yeah, fair.
And it depends. When I was thinking about a theme of forgiveness, which comes up a lot, and Better with Bacon is talking about a theme of forgiveness, and he's going to come on. We haven't come up with a time yet, but come on. We're going to extend this discussion of Arcane with some people. Perhaps Bacon will come on talking about the theming. But I did see forgiveness coming up a lot in season 2.
Yeah.
sometimes in a heavy-handed way that like it violates our Maxwell Alexander Drake rule of you can't ever say your theme. Right, better with Bacon saying theme of forgiveness for freedom rather than forgiveness. So he'll talk more about that. But so that may be true. But my thinking was the forgiveness idea is perfectly acceptable for. Oh no, forgiveness was Titter Pig Rancher's theme. Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't know that. I also picked up on forgiveness quite a bit. But what I was thinking was that forgiving someone, that's perfectly okay on a personal level. That like when you're dealing with a personal arc, that like in order to get past whatever you're dealing with, you really got to forgive this person. Okay, that's fine. But that doesn't, what Brianna's talking about, absolve that person of the consequences of what that person is forgiving them for. Right. And we didn't see that here. Like, it may be that Kate has to forgive Jinx, but especially if what I was saying about seeing Jinx at full power, and you're talking about making her the leader of that. Kate can Vi can forgive Jinx, or Kate can, whatever. We can have these forgiveness, but just those personal forgiveness doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of what we've done. And so the story has to deal with both of those.
Yeah,
the cheap way out is death. A cheap way out is death.
That's a good way to put it. I think that's why I don't like it. It feels cheap. It feels like we're just going to escape the consequences. But they're dead. Okay, no worries.
And I felt like that as well, because we did have Mbessa's dead, Jinx is dead, okay, or not. There's some ambiguity, maybe, right? End, whatever. But at least she would be dead to everybody in the story. Like as far as that perspective, that okay, that we're not dealing with any legal consequences or moral, because she's dead, even if she's not dead because they want to make a appearance in a cameo appearance on their show or something. Okay, but she's dead there. I was like, that's easy. It can work. So it absolutely can work sometimes. Like like you're talking about Darth Vader, the death of Darth Vader.
Yeah, you don't want to keep what would you keep him alive and Return of the Jedi?
Let's not see Darth Vader on trial by the Galactic Judiciary or something like. I mean, like that.
Yeah, I think in that one it's because there's the emotional resonance resolution of the father and son relationship, and it kind of needed to end right there.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. It depends on the story. Like that might be the best solution, but yeah, obviously, I think what you're trying to say is explore other solutions before that should be like a last resort type of solution.
Yeah, I think so. I think it can't be your it can't be a crutch. You can't just like default to that. Okay, and then the other thing, play up Maddie's hurt and jealousy way more. So she realizes
that was like
being
fake.
Oh yeah,
non-existent.
Yeah, we just glossed over that. So she realizes she was being used, that Kate never cared about her. But this isn't my one time I'm going to introduce something that's not an element that already exists, I suppose. It would be fun if she, I guess this actually already is happening in there, just barely. I want to see her pretend to still be on Caitlyn's side. Maybe she goes as far as like pretends to join forces with her as like a double agent or something like that. That would be fun to watch.
Yeah, if you had time, you could really work with that one.
I know there's so much potential there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about like,
right, even when Mbessa was like, I told you about getting involved in I was like, this sounds like a personal relationship, not a professional relationship. But okay, whatever. She was still getting at. But I thought that like when she said that, I wasn't thinking betrayal. I was thinking like, what are you spending your time doing? And like, are you favoring this person over some of your other soldiers and things like that? I mean, there are a lot of things that could have meant. So yeah, yes, absolutely expand that, because that it kind of came out of nowhere. Yes, there was that line that she delivered, but that could have meant a lot of things. Play it up. Absolutely agree.
Okay, so now I wanted to talk about having them have a common enemy. So how would you set that up? A little bit differently than it currently is. So I would say, so basically, let's show Victor's cult becoming a problem that's plaguing Zahn. Like somehow, like right now, it's just kind of there. But like let that.
Oh, and they're way over there.
What's that?
Oh, and they're way over there too.
Yeah. So
Where
so
is that compound, by the way?
I don't know, but it feels vaguely on. I guess I don't know, but it should have been like something that, you know, maybe at first everyone's like, oh wow, what is this? And then it starts to become, oh wow, what is this? This is a cult, and it's like everyone's kind of
Whoops.
becoming these weird zombie people. Like it should have been something where like people in Zon are getting really uncomfortable and really concerned, and it's maybe even maybe they're being, I don't know, like there's so much you can play with.
You got to
before
show
we
them
get cult.
encroaching into society.
What's that?
You have to show them encroaching in society in a
Exactly.
negative way. In fact, Game of Thrones with Sparrow and his cult, they did a pretty good job of showing them kind of invading society and becoming problematic, and then starting getting into the power structures, and you're like, whoa, what the heck?
Oh,
Yep.
that's an excellent point, Doug. Man, I like that you made the equivalence to the Sparrow and his group, because I hadn't thought about that, because the obvious parallel that I thought of, and that a lot of people also on the internet thought of, is the White Walkers. That, okay, you have the Game of Thrones political situation going on, but they established rather early that there is this outside threat that none of them are taking seriously.
Right, that's like the
You know,
existential
I mean,
threat.
Right. But we have kind of an existential threat going on with Victor and his stuff. But I like that the analogy with the Sparrow and his group better with what Brianna is talking about. So it's infiltrating society. It's more like the Sparrow. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was just giving an example of what Brianna was laying out for her plan.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. I haven't seen that on the internet before. So there you go.
Yeah. So we have that going on, right? So Zon's got a problem. And then up in Piltover, I don't know exactly how this looks like, but somehow Mbessa's conspiracy is plaguing Piltover. Mbessa's becoming a problem up there. Okay. And then, so each of these sides has a problem. And then those two sides ally with each other. Mbessa's allies join with Victor. JC's worth is going to go, and that's what creates the uneasy alliance between Zon and the rebellious members of Piltover against that common enemy that's threatening them all. Both of their problems become one problem, and it's a bigger problem than whatever they're having in their, you know, top versus down. And it could even be like the crux of the top versus down stuff is actually coming from the top of the top, you know. That's like those, not all of Piltover necessarily is going to be supporting this sort of you know, this
Heavy-handed.
dictator, whatever the word is, you know, like dictator stuff. And so that can be some way that you could play it. So this would be where Maddie pretends to be one of those rebels, but she's really aligned with Mbessa. So you have basically a split happening in Piltover, which again is what kind of happens in the story, but like more expanded more. And then this rebellion, so here we go back to our politician character, is orchestrated by Mel, right? So given that Caitlin would already be with Zon at this point in this version, Mel is using her intelligence and wit to covertly betray her mother, which drama moment, of course, still hurts. Insert family drama, guilt, etc. Am I doing the right thing? Am I any better than she is? You know, blah blah blah. You have all that stuff. You got a lot you can play with. Oh, and then I don't know if this is necessary, but for me, I feel like I would like to have an actual romance between Echo and Jinx. Like we hinted at that. I don't know why that needs to end tragically. I guess this is not me playing with the existing elements, but I'll get into that more. But I would like to see that happening here. You know, he comes back and then he tries to reach out to her. And then, you know, we have Vi, Caitlin, Jinx all slowly healing the wounds between them. They were once enemies at various points, and now they become a powerful team with Echo. Let's say all four of them are together. So now we've got all this stuff set up. When we have a final showdown with all these forces, it's going to feel so much more earned, right? Let's say Mel finally reveals her magic power in this fight for the first time to her mother. Like that would be so much more interesting, right? Like we're seeing her mostly being a politician, and it's not like she's just like she's on the battlefield kind of a thing, but somehow that magic becomes helpful. We see everyone complete their character arcs, all the plot lines and themes are wrapped up. I already said I don't like this. I implied that I don't like this thing with Jinx. I don't think we should have that sacrificial death moment for her. I'm a bad person, so I guess I just have to die now. Like, I don't see what that is saying in terms of the themes of the story.
So how would you do it?
Well, you don't. My point is that you don't redeem yourself through self-sacrifice. You redeem yourself through hard work. So I want to see her doing the hard work throughout an entire season to show who she is now and what kind of a person she's become. Now we still have to deal with the fact that there are consequences to actions. I haven't thought about that. I don't know what that would look like, but if we're going to see
you
her
try to find something satisfying,
right, there would be a way to do it that I think without reverting to the cheap, oh, she's just going to sacrifice herself. The other thing I wrote, I felt like it feels like a cop out, basically. But yeah, so we have this whole thing about like, can there be a united Zahn Piltover? We kind of get a little bit of that at the end because we see, as it currently is, because we see Savika, on that council or whatever. But it's like, but what led to that happening? I don't understand. It was just because they joined together with common forces. I think. Well, and I guess what am I trying to say? I would buy that if there was more to it. If it wasn't just, oh, we have a common enemy. Okay, now we're allies. Like, let's show the difficulties of that alliance and how people still fight with each other. Like, they're trying to be allies, but it's difficult because of all the history between them. Someone notices that there's a specific officer that killed their friend or something. They want to go and punch him in the face. And it's like, it's difficult to be allies. It's like, have moments like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And through all that difficulty and the challenge of that is where people start to find common ground. And that is where people start to find ways that they can work together despite their differences. And then we see them allied, right? Then it's earned. Then there's work and a process behind it besides just this, oh, I guess we're on the same side now.
Well, Star Trek,
something about it. Then there's themes behind that moment instead of just slapped on.
yeah. And Star Trek actually had an elegant solution for it. Kirk went rogue in Star Trek 3. He stole the Enterprise. He went to a forbidden planet. He broke like multiple regular. But then in Star Trek 4, there was an outside threat. Kirk saved him. They were on the same team at that point. He saved him, and they brought him before in a trial. And what they did was they dropped all charges except for one, disobeying a commanding officer. So basically, he still had to answer for some things, but the culture made an exception for him due to his extraordinary actions in a time of crisis. So that was a good way to, he didn't die. They didn't forgive him. They didn't forget. He was on trial, and they made a kind of a special arrangement, and that felt satisfying. And he was demoted, right, to captain, which felt satisfying because he was trying to get back to captain since Star Trek 1. So anyway, you're right. There are ways to do it without killing off the character. That's
a great example because that shows like, something like that could have happened with Jinx.
Totally.
Yeah.
Especially if what you're talking about when there's, if Piltover and Zahn unite and Jinx ends up fighting on the side and saves Piltover in some way, obviously Piltover is going to reassess how they feel about this person.
Yeah. And then I wanted it to be a bit more of a happy ending. This is, I guess, again, me changing things, so I'm not being completely consistent with this principle. But like, let's see Jinx and Echo settle together. Let's see Vine and Caitlin settle together, because sad doesn't equal good storytelling, and that's kind of what it felt like. It just felt like arbitrary sad was at the ending of the story, as if they felt like, if I make it sad, then people will feel things, and that's good. No, it's setup plus payoff combined with good structure, clear character arcs, all united around a cohesive moral theme. That's good storytelling. That's my definition. Okay. Well, that was very true in season 1, but yeah, season 2 needed a more high level rethinking about how all of these elements work together. And we can have some bittersweetness, like let's say they get together, but there's a lot of pain and sacrifice that leads to that victory. There's still consequences to people's actions. Like maybe if we had to have Isha die, maybe she dies and the climax for some reason, then that helps for some thematic reason. I don't know what it would be. I'm just throwing that out there. Like, you could have it be you could have it be how do I structure the sentence? You could have this be a victory that is earned with difficulty, right? But I just don't understand what the point is of its current ending and like what that is supposed to say thematically. If there is an intention there, I'm missing it.
I think it's thematically gibberish.
Yeah.
And that's evidence of bad writing. They did a bunch of things that they thought would elicit a reaction, and they didn't think about what all these consequences meant. And so as a result, the theme is incoherent. It's incoherent.
Well, also, okay, so I want to say hi to a couple of people in the chat. Quigs the Vicious, I don't know if we've said hi yet, but welcome.
He's talking about Kirk being demoted to captain. It was, you're punished by getting exactly what you've always wanted. Oh, shucks.
Right. Walter also, welcome, Walter. But when we were talking about General Grievous says, I don't really see Jinx sacrifice as redemption. I think part of the problem potentially for that is that by talking about not ending everything together, like we had mentioned earlier, it really felt like Jinx and Vi, to me, were on a side quest with Victor.
Yeah.
Not Victor, Warwick. Vander/Warwick. I felt like they had become side characters in what I kind of thought was their story as they're fighting this werewolf guy. It doesn't really matter whether or not they kill that werewolf guy or not, or whatever goes on. If Victor's wins, because then everybody becomes a zombie guy anyway. So that was weird, and I think that's why it's difficult to see Jinx's sacrifice as redemption. Okay, at that moment, at the most superficial level, okay, a sacrifice to keep her sister from being drug off the whatever, but it's not like that would have mattered in the grand scheme of our story. So it wasn't a sacrifice to defeat Victor. Which I think you're right, Brianna, that still would not have been that great, but especially being a sacrifice on a side quest.
Yeah,
it's
a good
rough.
Point.
Yeah. It's difficult to deal with. It's difficult, and I think that's why that was one of the moments in Arcane where you're really supposed to feel something, and I certainly have felt things throughout Arcane. But man, I didn't feel, like I said, when I finished the story, I felt nothing. Like I had no emotional impact from Jinx falling off.
Oh my God. When she was holding her, I guess this is another cliche. When she was like, when Vi is leaning over and she's holding her with one hand, I literally like rolled my eyes. I was like, are you kidding me? Are you really using this? It's so cliche. Oh no, I'm holding you over this cap. Does that ever happen? Like ever in real life? I don't know. It just, there's something about that. Like, I think the only time that worked for me is like that happens in Lord of the Rings. I have to think about why. That's the only time that trope has happened where it doesn't bother me. I think it's because it doesn't happen the way you think. Because usually that means, oh, this person's going to drop them and they're going to die. Like, you're just like, okay, I know what's happening. That time he's like, don't you dare, and so it's a little bit of the trope isn't what you expect. He actually does pull him out and Frodo survives. Spoiler alert. Just kidding. 20-year-old movie. So yeah, that was just everything about that setup to me was just incredibly tropey in a bad way.
I do agree that I felt that Vi and Jinx were a little sidelined in the show, and to me, I was like, that's an egregious mistake because I feel like their relationship is the core of this. Now, there are other relationships that are very close to that core, but Vi and Jinx are the core of Arcane, in my opinion. I rewatched episode 1 of season 1 with that creepy, or not even creepy. What's the word? That tragic sounding like child song that by the river. I was like, man, this is so freaking good. The sisterhood is front and center right there, and it's a war-torn landscape situation. And by the way, they show the mother laying dead in that scene, which is something I didn't understand or really catch or when I first saw it. But now that I've seen her in the flashback in season 2, I was like, oh, there's mom dead, unfortunately. But I was like, they are the ones that brought us into Arcane, the show. They should have been the ones to take us out, not with a quick scene, but with with a complete, full, and satisfying arc.
Yep.
Okay, let me ask you. I want to ask you this question, Brianna, regarding the external threat. So you just went through a exercise where you restructured the show using its existing elements as it was, but putting them in different orders. And if you were to not so constrain yourself, would you use an external threat to unify Zahn and Piltover, or would you try to do it in a different way?
I have to think about that. I don't know. I don't know. See, I don't know. I don't know. That's I can't answer that as a first thought.
Well, I'll give you a way you kind of answered it, which is an interesting way. That you kind of implied, and also by the sparrow analogy that Doug put out, that you had moved it from an external threat to an internal threat.
Oh yeah,
you're right. I guess it is an internal threat, not an external threat. Huh?
Yeah. So I was wondering about that. That like oh my God, the army marching across to them, and everybody had better stand up on the walls of the city together, because that even if the cult were infiltrating both of them.
Ooh yeah.
Yeah. So then because you might need.
That's
I haven't thought
good.
about
I
some
like
great
that.
detail later. I haven't thought about this in as much detail as obviously Brianna has, but I still don't like the external threat resolution. It might work, but I really like the idea of some type of mutual corrupting internal threat that serves as a catalyst for them to actually address their issues. It can't just be like, oh, everybody, we go man the walls. Because like, if we don't, we're all going to die.
They did that quick.
It could be like they each try to deal with that internal threat, and neither of them can on their own.
And neither of them can on their own.
Yeah.
Right. And so they've got to get together and they actually deal with their issues. That's how I think it should be.
I like that.
I'll tell you, I'm doing some of that in my current book, where there is some of this infiltrating going on both sides. And what's weird is once you get into this, you're never really in alliance. It's always kind of like looking over your shoulder type of alliance. So it actually makes for good storytelling, because you're like, okay, maybe we can work together to push them out. But then this one guy takes advantage of it, and now both sides want to fight again. Like it gets real fragile.
Yeah, and see, that would have been a fun thing to play with for an entire other season, right? Like, this very tentative alliance, and that's how you maintain some complexity. Like, it's not just like, okay, everything's good now. Like, okay, now we've defeated this internal threat, and then we see someone from Zahn being on that board, and then it's like, now the real work is going to begin, and that's where you end the story, right? Like, we're taking our steps towards that complicated ideal goal of trying to get along, and it's never going to be perfect, but you're moving in that direction. I think that would have been a more satisfying and kind of realistic way to handle that theme.
The Titterpig RPG, Titterpig Rancher for $10. Thank you very much. Sable says, "You're right, Heath. These are my favorite kind of super chats to get." You're right. Even season 1 set up the Arcane as the real threat and intelligent, with Victor's line of "the Arcane speaks through them. He always needed to be the vessel of the grander conflict." So yeah,
well, they always set up that. Yeah, they set up always, and it was so good that Hex Tech is a double-edged sword. It gives you all these things, but that there's this really big dark side that everyone seems to be ignoring. So they did set it up in season 1. They could have done a lot.
It's weird we're talking about an internal threat, the geographic element of that, because of course Victor was internal. He's one of the assistant to one of the counselors and all of that, so he's internal, all of that. But just moving the geographic center of that from wherever it is that they are, and we didn't really know, but outside to know, we want that cult to be right in the middle of all of this. Moving that physically inside changes a lot.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I definitely like that better than what we got. And it sounds like even the writers are conceding that they kind of blew it on some level. And it is a shame.
I would love to watch that. Like, I would have loved to see that show that I just described.
Yeah, that
well, both seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would have been good. And I think it would have been consistent with the characters as presented already in season 1, in which they worked at, and not just worked, they worked at some of the highest levels for characterization. You know, right. I also felt, and I'll get into some of this in a second, but you know, the lesser storytelling took away opportunities, I think, from the animators to do some really cool stuff. I mean, I would have loved to have seen a real, genuine tactical effort between of Piltover and Zahn fighting each other. The action could have been great, especially because you care about the characters and the situation at stake. You've been invested in it since season 1. So I would have loved to have seen what the animators came up for all that. But as such, you know, they just took those opportunities away with quick, easy, or cheap scenarios, in my opinion. And I do want to say that the animators are still the greatest thing about season 2.
Absolutely.
I saw the Titter Pig says, "Thank you for $5." Titter Pig says Victor was always the most interesting part of the show, even in season 1. That doesn't mean he's the emotional core of it. That's always Vi and Jinx.
Right.
Well, you know, sometimes that happens, but another character emerges is really uninteresting.
Well, and Druden Fuzz says that the name of the show is Arcane. Therefore, you know, it's not called the Vi and Jinx show. But Druden Fuzz, I can't connect to Arcane. In fact, I'm not even positive what exactly Arcane is. I have some loose understandings that the show has given me some idea of what Arcane is. I can't emotionally connect with that. I can emotionally connect with Vi. I can emotionally connect with Jinx. And I can emotionally connect to Vi and Jinx as a sisterhood. So I think that emotional connection has been my strongest as a viewer. And I bet a lot of people would agree with that. There could be other characters that other people feel strong about, but I think that emotional connection is what's driving the story the most, not necessarily any emotional connection to Arcane. Arcane seems to be the center of gravity that a lot of events revolve around in orbit, but there's no emotional connection to it.
I think the Arcane is supposed to be thematically important. I think, and I feel like this was a little bit clearer earlier, and it just became really muddled towards the end. I think Arcane is supposed to be symbolic of like human nature and the fact that it's this what's the word I'm looking for?
Force.
Duality, you know, of the potential for order and chaos, you know, that there's this potential for good, but there's also a dark side. We see that a little bit in like that kind of monologue that Victor has after Jace tries to kill him that first time. The stuff that he says while he's dying about things being, you know, two sides of the same coin and all that stuff. So I feel like that's what they were trying to do. Yeah. But they could have made that a little bit more clear in how they stuck the landing.
Yeah, and who cares? Arcane is a pretty cool word. I love like everything. There's just from a visual artistic standpoint, I love the Arcane logo. In fact, I even based the Heroines Labyrinth book off Arcane, not just Arcane, but there. You know, I was looking at some of my favorite covers, and Arcane is definitely one of them. But Great Gatsby, you know, the idea of the grid system around the letters, I use that in my cover because I loved Arcane so much. But they're dirty gold lettering with the backlighting. Like there's so much to like about it. just from a visual cue point of view. Yeah,
steampunk is great. I feel like we haven't seen a lot of really cool, like more pop culture versions of steampunk. Or if we have, I'm blanking. So I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me if I'm wrong.
This is really my first engagement with steampunk.
Yeah, steampunk's always been in my periphery. Like I've engaged with it in art. I experienced it in some media, but never something like big and mainstream like this.
I've always, when I walk through like comic book store, you know, they have figurines and stuff. Like steampunk was always something I'd side eye. Like I'm like, man, that just looks cool.
Yeah.
But I never followed a show that did anything with it. Mm-hmm. So Arcane was season 1, especially, and to some extent season 2, as far as world steampunk goes, extremely satisfying. Like, man, how cool. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think that final battle, you got to have airships in that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Titter Pig Ranger is clarifying. I like this. Zahn is Art Nouveau cyberpunk. Piltover is Art Deco steampunk. All right.
That was very precise and correct. Yes.
Very
That's
precise.
right.
All right. All right. Well,
Yeah.
No, that's it. That's pretty cool. I'm glad he
Yep.
made that distinction.
No disagreement. All right,
Yeah.
shall I move to my third topic?
All right.
Yes.
Third topic. Let's go.
This one I didn't write any notes for. It's just something I was thinking about. So I'm just gonna have to do the best with doing this off the top of my head. But so I want to talk about Vi and Kate from an archetypal perspective. Now they're as kind of hinted at before, there's still structural issues with their relationship in season 2. That very effective scene, the scene, kind of controversial in terms of its timing. A lot of people have mentioned, which I also felt, that it was like the way Jinx left her, it felt like she was going to go commit suicide. Like I thought,
Yeah.
why would she not think? Like, why would,
herself.
you know what I mean? Like it was just such a weird timing. Some people have said that maybe it was because it was like they are about to go to battle. They don't know if either of them are going to survive. So it's kind of this moment of like, got to act while we can, live in the moment while we can. But it's just I still maintain that it's weird, specifically because of how Jinx left her. But the scene itself was great. I'll talk about that more in a second. But yeah, so structural issues aside, there's something very interesting about this, which is another thing that is like, haven't seen this in pop culture. But basically, I'm a member as a card carrying lesbian. I'm a member of a lot of different online groups that are related to sapphic media in general. I just lurk in them, and let me tell you, people have been going crazy over Arcane. I've seen post after post after post after post of people being like, I can't live after Arcane. I need recommendations for stuff that's similar to this relationship. And people go and they give them tons and tons of book references, and they're mostly indie things. I think the biggest thing that people give as a recommendation is Gideon the Ninth, with that, which I recommended. Doug, you mentioned that one.
Yes, Gideon the Ninth. I talk
Gideon
about
the
it.
Ninth has the same archetype. So there's a very specific romantic archetype that is specific to sapphic romance. I want to talk about this for a second because it's a fun sort of side topic, but it's about storytelling. So we're all very familiar with the straight female romantic fantasies, basically the two big ones. There are some other ones, but the big ones are, for the straight female imagination, it's the Beauty and the Beast archetype, right? We see this in just about every single romance story. You have this, very hyper masculine guy. He's also, really mature. That's why often he's like 1,000 years old, but still looks 20, and kind of aggressive, but like very protective of her. So dangerous, but not dangerous to her. But then she kind of civilizes him, I guess, makes some husband material. That's a very, very, very big straight female fantasy, and you're taking things that are like real but exaggerating them, right? Same thing for like the straight male fantasy. The big one is going to be like a fight in of competence against other men to earn the right to the woman's hand, right? And it's like, what's the real life equivalent, right? It's like, oh, I'll give like Doug, we were talking about this in person when you're talking about like, oh, you're like at a bar, going after a girl, and another guy comes and he's also interested. It's not like you're most likely not going to like get into a fist fight or something. I mean, maybe, but most likely not. But most likely it's going to be a much more subtle form of competition. But that's
very subtle.
Very subtle. But that's the thing that is very fundamental to that experience, right? Like and so in a fantasy, a story, is all exaggerated. It's like you're these big epic battles, and whoever is the most competent at this is going to win. And so there are equivalents to that in lesbian romance, and this particular archetype that Vi and Kate embody is as fundamental as archetypal and primal. But like I said, I don't think it's ever been in pop culture before. I don't think it has. Extremely popular in like romance, lesbian romance and stuff like that. If you read,
what is it, like indie lesbian romance?
Yeah, but there are multiple ones. I'm not going to get into depth. There's multiple archetypes, but this one in particular I would describe it as like the submissive mask, submissive butch, dominant femme, and that archetype. So what that is?
Wait. Submissive mask, dominant femme.
Mm-hmm.
What What does mask mean? What do you mean by mask?
So that's just like it stands for masculine, fem stands for
Masculine.
feminine. It's
Oh,
so someone has kind of
okay.
masculine energy, someone has kind of feminine energy. That's kind of a more common, I was saying mask or butch. Butch is a little bit, people still use that term, but I would say younger generations of queer people use mask as an umbrella
I
term.
got you. No, I totally got you.
Yeah.
I've got
So-
the word mask for my writing has had a
I know.
completely
I
different
thought
Yeah,
I
M-A-S-C.
meaning. I got you.
Yep.
Feminine mask. Okay.
Right. And so, the way this looks in fiction, again and again and again and again and again, the way this looks is there's always going to be a power difference between them. So like one is going to be higher in society. The femme, a common example of this would be like a princess and a bodyguard. That's like a really common, like I'm literally reading a book right now that has an exact dynamic. It's a princess and a bodyguard, but it's like, she's going to be, the femme is, she's going to be powerful, but not necessarily, she might have some sort of combat abilities, but it's mostly not. Mostly she has a different kind of power. Usually
Social power.
And she's usually
Authority.
We had that in House of the Dragon.
Authority.
Sorry, I kept missing what you said, Doug.
Authority. She has some level of
Yes,
social authority, maybe.
She's got a lot of power, but it's the power to command usually. Whereas the masked character pretty much always is some sort of combat related person, some sort of a fighter, muscular, very competent.
Yeah, they kind of musculared her up.
Yeah, she's going to be competent, whether it's swords or fists, whatever it is. That's what she does, and she's there. And there's often an element of protecting the femme character, but also submitting to, and that can look like all sorts of different things. Like if it's a social difference, then of course it's like this person literally has the power to command her, and it's like this whole dynamic of, oh, I'll do anything to whatever you want me to do, I'll do anything to protect you, to serve you. That's kind of the feeling. So of course this is like a certain kind of dynamic that can exist in there's a lot of different lesbian dynamics, but that's one way that like a kind of a butch femme dynamic can be. Of course, that's extremely exaggerated. That's not like what it really is in real life in the same way as those other examples are. But that is like the emotional expression of that archetype. And yeah, there's another.
So you're saying it may have been structurally so because it wasn't. It wasn't egregious. Like it's something I could complain about, but nothing I'm not gonna die on that mountain. It wasn't that big of a deal. But what you're saying, so it may have been imperfect, the setup, but you're saying as delivered, once it was delivered, it was archetypally sound. It matched.
Yeah, what I'm saying is they touched on an archetype that really resonated with a lot of sapphic women, from what I observed. And everyone's like, "Oh, I need more of this. I need more of this." It's like it's like a straight girl discovering Twilight and being like, "Oh my God, this is scratching some primal part of my brain. I need more of this."
Interesting.
Yeah, and I really think it's like on that level. And I just think that's really cool.
Well,
again, there's lots of tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of media out there. I've been collecting examples of it. Actually, this might be another book of mine of researching romantic archetypes.
Nice. Yeah, we talked about that when you were in town. That was a great convo, by the way.
This is the biggest example. I'll just briefly mention another one just to show, because I'm like, this isn't the only one. There's also which is actually more common, dominant butch submissive femme. You can reverse that, and that is another romantic element in lesbian romance, that it has different archetypes. But yeah, I thought that was really cool to see that as like a cultural moment of like having that be in the mainstream. But yeah, so it was as a fan kind of engaging with that element of the show. There was a bit of a mixed thing, like all the sapphic communities I'm a part of, people were just raving. They loved it. But they were still on some of the mainstream like fandom pages, a lot of homophobia reacting to that, which was pretty shitty. I had someone comment responding to me being homophobic to me just because I was enjoying aspects of it. And so it was just interesting to note there's still like, I guess, I don't know if that's like some toxic element of the fandom, or if there's, I don't know, or just people coming in to be shitty. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting, that it's like the way people were reacting and how it was new for some people. And but yeah, good. So I appreciate that, even though I don't think they were trying to do that. What I wanted to say was, for the for the sex scene itself, it even fit into that archetype. You know what I'm saying? Like it was the right, it was the right thing to have her to have Vi go to her knees. Like that was exactly correct. What you would have for that kind of an archetype. Literally in the I'm like I was saying, I'm reading a book right now that has the same archetype. Their first sex scene, same thing happened. Same thing. So yeah. I don't know what else.
Yeah, it probably would have been very satisfying if like you said, they took their time with this,
Yeah.
and built this up. I mean, you could have really ran with this, and I think you could have had a mainstream wholesale acceptance. I think sometimes when you rush things like that, you give the mainstream a reason to kind of pull back a little bit, But it is interesting what you're saying. That's pretty fascinating. The dynamics that you're talking about, specifically.
Yeah,
I'd never heard that before. That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that I haven't seen. This is partly why I'm fascinated, because I haven't seen anyone else identify this. I'm sure someone else has, but I just haven't seen anyone do it. And so that makes me really intrigued. I want to do a lot of research and find out more romantic archetypes I want to see what gay men have, or like if they have something different. But yeah, I've got a lot of other thoughts. This may be another project of mine at some point.
Well, if you do that, I think that should be a subject of table talk. Come back for that table talk.
I would love to do. Give me some more time. No, genuinely, I want to do a table talk.
That would be interesting.
And let's do a table talk on that subject. I think that's. But no, I was just gonna say that, I think same thing that the Titter Pig just said, and maybe I lost it. So sorry. Okay. Oh no, right. Yeah, right. That actually that same dynamic takes place. Excuse me. Yes. Straight romances too. The authoritative female and the commanding, controlled male. That's why I was saying we had that in House of the Dragon with.
No, that is 100%. There's a straight version of that too. It's just less common. Yeah. 100%. 100% exists.
We have the princess, and in that one. What is his name, sir? What is the Kingsguard knight? Somebody will say in the chat, but anyway, yeah. So we had that she's there, but then also I was thinking about maybe we should go to this movie. I remember my mother really loved this movie. Isn't that it? The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner and Winona and Whitney
Out of
Houston.
All the visuals we had tonight, we have the Bodyguard with Whitney Houston.
We have the Bodyguard visual. So there you go. Now I want to check out that movie, because that's the. Where we go.
One of my running theories.
That would be a fantastic topic. That would be a fantastic topic.
Yeah, one of my running theories. I'll say this, and then we'll move on. Is that when it comes to romance, I think it is a lot more universal. That it's essentially like with gay romance, it's the same things that you find in straight romance, but it's just expressed a little bit differently. And sometimes it doesn't look the same at a first glance, but then it actually is. So yeah, lesbians will fantasize both about taming the beast and about competing for the right to with men and not with other women. But yeah, Andrew. Anyway, I'll move
with
on.
Other men too. Yeah,
because that's the reality, right? That's the archetype. Primarily, what if a lesbian's?
No, I've actually experienced that.
Man, most likely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, is she think, are we competing?
Oh yeah, you were talking about that. You're like, you had a moment like that once.
Yeah. That's so funny. Well, that's awesome. That is a insightful discussion there. I had not thought of it like that.
Was there more, Brianna?
Those are all my thoughts.
Okay. Well, Doug, then I guess it goes to you.
So, yes. So, we talked about some of the specifics. We talked about some of the dialogue and everything about Arcane season 2. And, I thought a lot went wrong with season 2. And I was feeling pressure from people to just like it. Why don't you just like this? And I was like, why don't I? So I was like, why don't I like it? What is my problem? What is it that I think I'm picking up on? Right? What is it that I'm reacting to that's causing me to say, nope, they're missing here. And it's not the first time. I felt like this multiple different times on multiple different shows where I felt that there was an issue, And at the time that it's come out, I've been attacked for suggesting that it wasn't great storytelling or that they were making fundamental or structural errors. I'll never forget The Last Jedi. I mean, Jesus, people were all over me on The Last Jedi. And I was like, look, you can't kill the primary villain in the second movie. I'm like, do you understand the problem that this? I'm like, maybe they'll pull it off, but now they're gonna have to find some other major villain for the way this is Star Wars. This isn't like Birdman or an art house film. Like you have to have a primary villain. I remember when Game of Thrones season 8 came out after the first episode. I was like, I don't know. And I had never said this about a Game of Thrones episode. I pretty much loved season 1 through season 7. So it really caused me with Arcane season 2 to ask myself, and I will say that I was proven right over time, that the consensus seems to have been that those are misfire. And it's not just those two, but those are two famous examples where I'm not right at the time. I'm unpopular at the time, but time has worked in my favor. So I was like, maybe I'm seeing something, but it's probably worth it to write down what it is I'm talking about.
I'm glad
Why
we have
do
you
I
on the
think
channel, Doug, for
I
the early
know,
yet
we will
controversial take.
air it this month.
So, so what I decided is I started writing down some specifics, not specific scenes, but specific categories of flaws that exist in all of these stories that have proven to be, over time, either rejected or considered failed writing, or at least not as good as we thought they were when they came out. And so I'm calling these aspects destabilizing story elements. These are things that, as a writer, when you introduce them into your story, you are destabilizing your story on some level. Now, a destabilization in your story is not in and of itself a problem. You can actually base an entire story around a major destabilization event. So it's really how the writer handles it. And secondly, I've noticed that the stories that use these destabilizing elements offset them by tempering them. So a destabilizing element introduces a level of ambiguity, inconsistency, and risks character dilution and decharacterization and story destabilization. You run this risk. That's the issue. Okay, so just to jump into it. So in a world building sense, one of the first ones I wrote down was abstract settings. This is a destabilizing element. When you look in the background, when you ask yourself, where is this character? If they're in this abstract sort of world, that could be destabilizing because you're less fixed on where that character is. The setting is a little vague. And so what the character's doing there and how they're surviving, what the laws of physics are, all of those things simply destabilize the story a little bit because we're disoriented on some level. Whereas if you put the characters in a tavern, a concrete setting, it's stable. That's a stable environment for these characters. We understand it. We recognize the dynamics that are going on. We understand the purpose of this setting. We understand a lot about the setting, and the background, especially in visual medium, gives us a ton of clues. Is this a seedy tavern? Is this a high-scale, hoity-toity type of place? The background tells you a lot of information. The background's part of that world building. So when you introduce characters that are in space, I'm not talking about like spaceship flying. I'm talking about floating in space or in these barren, hard to understand landscapes. Those are abstract environments. We don't really know what's going on there. Even the compound that they introduced in Arcane season 2 here was I guess it was at the edge of Zaun, and it was semi-idyllic, which seemed to be a little bit at odds with the catastrophic events of the world. It introduced a level of abstraction there that weakens the setting. It weakens what the characters are doing there. It's hard to understand how the characters relate. This was a cult, like a utopian thing. We don't really know what's going on here. So abstract settings or backgrounds is a destabilization thing. Magic.
Okay.
Introducing magic to the world.
Just so clarification.
Yeah, give us some
on that,
examples of that one.
because I got because at first when you said the abstract setting and world building, the first place that my mind was going was kind of to an to a story where the world is whatever it needs to be. rather than
Right. It's
something
just an ambiguous.
That's not what you were talking about. You're talking about the Victor floating in space.
Right. An ambiguous
visual
setting. Right. And a setting that's more ambiguous and undefined and abstract rather than concrete. That, again, it's not a kill shot to the story if you do this. So I'm not saying don't ever do this. I'll tell you what you don't want to do is add multiple layers of this, because the more of these you add, the more you're destabilizing your story, the more difficult it is for the viewer to have a concrete grasp of what the hell's going on in the scene. So an abstract setting. What's that?
Am I correct to say it's like, get close to my microphone. It's like the audience feels less grounded when that's happening?
Yes. In fact, grounded is one of the words I use. It leaves you less grounded. And again, you can make it work, and tons of stories do make it work. And some people might even argue that it worked in Arcane. But again, the issue is there's a multiplier effect here. But you can actually ruin a story. I remember Aquaman, the first Aquaman, they had such ambiguous settings. I was like, they just didn't do their homework on the world building. Much better had they put them in a place that you understood on some level rather than some ambiguous sea room, in the background, So anyway, that's one. Magic can actually destabilize a story. And I don't want to cover this that much because this is a story based on magic. So the issues become what your job is as the writer is to ground it somehow. So if you're going to introduce an ambiguous setting, ground it by giving us some limitations, some rules, some idea of how things work here. Same thing with magic. You want magic to be limited, and you want magic to have boundaries, right? In fact, Brianna, your story, City of Reckoning, there's a scene where they're marshaling their forces, they're entering battle, and then there's a sorcery event that occurs. And it's frightening to all the people on the ground. Sorcery is back. Well, and it's not supposed to be. So sorcery introduced a new level, but sorcery did not take over your story. It was limited. It was confined. It was held to these places. The Force in Star Wars, it has this power, but it doesn't take over the whole story. It's used in very specific ways, in limited ways. That's the writer's effort to ground the magic on some level, to rein it in a little bit. Time travel is a destabilizing story element. You start introducing time travel, you're opening up issues. I put underneath time travel, different timelines. You can have a story that has time travel, but no different timelines. Or you can have a story with time travel and multiple timelines. That creates a problem. These are destabilizing because we're less certain about how the world works, right? And we're also a little less certain about how the time travel rules go. And a lot of stories have to spend some time explaining their time travel continuum or the end game thing, which is to say your past can't be your future. Therefore, if you go into your past, it can't be your future, which to me is just semantics. That's not a real rule set. So these are destabilizing aspects.
Well,
multiverses.
Time travel. I mean, I agree. We've talked about that.
Right. We've talked about this.
It's
and again,
there are movies that have done this well. And I think I might have even said this earlier in the discussion. Like we talked about Terminator. Terminator 1 and 2, we accepted as time travel stories. And then also like so that's one way that you can do it. Like another way is a very campy way you can do it, like Star Trek 4. Like, we like Star Trek 4 time travel story, but that one works. But then but it doesn't work a lot of the time. It's very difficult.
Well, and how did they ground it? They went back in time to 1987. We know 1987. It was 1987 when I went to the movies to see it. So they went back in time, but I'm immediately grounded because the characters go to a world that's instantly familiar for me. When Kirk walks out into the middle of the road and almost gets hit by a cab, it's like, what are you doing? The cab swears at him, and Kirk tries swearing poorly back at. It's funny because I understand the context. So I was grounded in Star Trek 4 by the timeline they traveled back to. It was beautiful. And Star Trek did not continue to reuse time travel in subsequent films. So they contained it.
They contained it. It was, but whereas like when I was like reading different Reddit threads and things like that, this came up, and a lot of people had problems with the plot holes that potentially came with the time travel in this. And and we're having intense discussions on it. I did kind of skip them, and I was like, we don't have that kind of discussion on
Right.
this show about like what is the particular ramifications of, you know, the time travel and whatever. But what I was taking note of, which I think is what you're bringing up here, is that the fact that now people are having, you know, 1,000 comment long discussions on Reddit threads trying to figure out the time travel
because the
That's a
story was destabilized. So
that's a
they're going onto
distraction from
Reddit.
your story. Right.
Right. They're going onto Reddit to try to solve it. Is this good? Is this bad? They're disoriented in the
What
story
do you
on
mean?
some
Right.
level.
Yeah.
Because the writers
Yeah.
destabilized the story. Now, some people can argue that they destabilized it effectively. Others can argue they destabilized it. Now I'm lost. But it destabilized the story.
But if you're having these comments about what does this mean, you know, and
Right.
is this a plot hole? Is this not a plot hole? Did this work? That yes, then there's a
Well,
problem.
it's a
It does get
destabilizing
engagement
element.
for your story.
Right. And what's interesting
Right.
is good stories tend to either focus on the destabilizing element in and of itself, like Terminator. They didn't just throw time travel in. That was the centerpiece. It's like, we're going to tell a story that's going to destabilize you as a viewer because it's involving time travel. And we're going to really get into this. We're going to focus on it. We're going to build lore around it. The whole story is going to center on it. Back to the Future, same thing. Because they focused on it, we're grounded in it. We understand they've contained it, and we enjoy it. So because they focus the story on it. Other ones where they introduce it, like Star Trek 4, where it wasn't a part of the stories before, and now it is, they still had to rein it in so that it doesn't take
in
over
that
the
one
story.
movie. It's in
Right.
that one movie. It's in that one. Well, I mean, there are some other time travel stories, but that story is one movie.
Right. For
This-
example, Star Trek First Contact wasn't as successful because when they went back in time, it's to the 21st century. I'm still a little disoriented because it's a different timeline. I don't know anything about post-apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Was it Oregon or I forgot? So,
but also they introduced time travel very late into Arcane.
Well, and right. Well, and that's another thing.
They didn't center me on that from the beginning of season 1.
Yeah.
It's not even season 2 if we're talking about different
Right.
stories between
So that's what I'm
seasons.
saying. Maybe they didn't center us
We're
on
th-
this destabilization.
I was surprised it was a time travel story. Oh my god. Okay, but we got time travel now in this story.
Right. So they didn't
Yeah, 'cause
center us on
unfortunately,
it.
only the fans knew that was coming.
Well, and maybe they did.
That's Echo's thing, right? Yeah, but that's
My
that
point
you
is,
have to know that it should say.
yeah, my point is to discuss this in general terms, that this is a destabilizing element. This is a destabilizing element for story. And the ways it has worked in the past is by centering on the destabilization or containing it in a way that the audience can understand. Those tend to be the two strategies that work. I call it anchoring. Anchor it.
I like that.
Give us an anchor. You know, timelines, which kind of is a kitty corner. It's different, but it's a kitty corner destabilizing element. Multiple timelines. Multiverses. This is a very destabilizing force. It can work. It worked in Spider-Man, No Way Home. It didn't work so well in Multiverse of Madness with Doctor Strange, and people are starting to hate multiverses. It's really worn out its welcome rather fast. You know, Hollywood thought they found the answer to everything with the multiverse, and now audiences are like, don't do it again. Don't do a multiverse. Oh, and the other kitty corner to multiverses are variant characters. This is very destabilizing because now you're diluting characters. Each version of the character you create gets less and less interesting over time, and they become more and more meaningless. So, like, I remember watching, what was it with all the Kangs? Ant-Man, Quantumania. There's like 1 million Kangs in the room. And I'm like, this is the bad villain of this new. I was like, I'm already lost. There's too many of them. So that's destabilizing. Variant characters, multiverses.
Okay, so let me comment on that, if I may, quickly.
Sure.
So right, yes. So that's also, I agree. Multiverses, I was like, and it's because you didn't use this word, but it's because you're starting to eliminate consequences.
Right.
If you're introducing multiple everythings and multiple characters and everything, that what you're doing in your stories, you're starting to say, you know, nothing has a consequence because there's another universe where that didn't happen, and we can go and explore that. And it seems like
the destabilizing element.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
So
yes.
what's destabilizing about magic? What's destabilizing about an abstract setting? Well, all of us in our lives are always in a concrete place. So when you put a character in a non-concrete abstraction, now there's a little wobble because I'm like, I don't really know how this world works. I don't understand this. What's destabilizing about magic? Well, you're throwing the laws of physics out the window for the audience. So they're like, wait a minute, how does this work? What's destabilizing about time travel? Well, time is something it's very stable for us. So when you throw that out the window, it's destabilizing. Multiverses, like you said, consequential action. That's now got me a little like this because now I don't know if anything matters. The next one.
Right.
Oh, wait, well, I just want to
hold
quickly
on,
make an aside. Just
Yeah.
to say an example of something that handles that one really, really, really well. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Have you guys seen it yet?
Loved
No,
it.
I have not.
I've studied it for the Heroine's Labyrinth.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Yep. Just wanted to make that note.
Yeah.
Because that
So,
one is
like
very grounded because there's very set rules on like how this works and why and what the stakes are and their personal.
Right. They center the story on the destabilizing aspect.
Yes, and
so it works.
Yes.
And they ground it. They keep a very small group of characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have Deidre Bobidra, which is Jamie Lee Curtis. You have Wayman and Alpha Raymond. You got her daughter. It's a small group that I could kind of understand.
Mm-hmm.
That's another grounding element. They anchored us by a small cast. So anyway, and that's a great example. Another destabilizing.
Hang on. I'm not quite done yet. So that's a similar situation to that is I would add dreams.
Oh yeah, I've got more.
Oh, okay.
I got more.
Okay. But what I was saying here, so episode 7, I think it's an interesting paradox, and I think episode 7 of season 2 is something that's interesting to study because, like you said, in the moment, you asked me, "Are you enjoying it?" I was like, "Yes, I'm enjoying it," and I think there are reasons why that episode is very good. And why people recall that episode, and has to do with, and I said this earlier, but has to do with recalling earlier ways of telling the story in Arcane. They're centered on characters. They bring us back to the Undercity that we want to see, and all of this, and we get to see that. But on the other hand, so in the moment as I was watching it, I did enjoy it, and certainly there are great elements of that. But I couldn't. But ultimately, I had to reconcile with the fact that nothing that happened there mattered. Now, of course, I think that he was going to Echo was going to create the device, the Z drive that could destroy Victor or whatever, and Heimerdinger was going to sacrifice himself. But okay, you could have done that not in an alternate universe. You could have structured so. So you could have moved the consequential things out of the multiverse format, and then in this case, you would have saved yourself a lot of time.
Well, I think
that you could have better used in the story.
Brianna said she would have liked to actually seen Echo and Jinx together. So why don't we go there? That's real. Why? Now it was emotionally pleasurable watching Echo and Jinx. I got to be honest.
I think it was really good seeing Powder that grew up without Jinx. There was something about that seemed really powerful too.
There was something
that happened. Yeah.
Very satisfying emotionally, even when I watched. Even the second time I watched it, when I was really negative, I was like, it's a shame that this is a waste or kind of a throwaway scene in some sense, but it's so good. I even like the slow motion thing they did. They did some artistic stuff there.
The slow motion thing was it was 4 frames a second. For his
I got to be honest, I loved it. The problem is, how does this fit into the story? You destabilize the story to show me this. Why not show me this without destabilizing this story? So, Brianna, and you said in your assessment, I would have actually shown a real relationship develop between Echo and Jinx. That's how you solve it, folks. Do what Brianna said. Do it in a more concrete, grounded way. And now you get the emotional payoff, and you've got an audience that's on board instead of an audience that has to go, didn't I guess that's not as real as I thought it was. You don't want to do that to your audience. You want to deliver for them. So the next one, a destabilizing element, mind control. When you add mind control into a story, you are taking out something that's stable, which is our autonomy on some level. Even if I'm captured and thrown in prison where the culture takes away my freedom, I still have autonomy. I'm limited with what I could do, but I'm going to try to break out of here. Mind control takes that away from you. So when you introduce that, you're destabilizing your audience again, because now you're watching characters lose their ability to respond autonomously, like for real. I'll skip ahead to some other ones. I have like supernatural intervention. You don't want to do that because that takes away the whole effort of the characters. That's also where you get the Deus Ex Machina, machine of the gods, that comes in and solves the problems at the end. A miraculous recovery. This also kind of goes in line
Jon
with
Snow, anyone?
What's that?
I said Jon Snow, anyone?
Yes. Yeah. So I'll even, okay. So one of the ones, Heath, you said was, it was all a dream. That's on here. If you take an entire scenario and make it a dream, you're destabilizing the story, because what you're really doing is getting out of your story into a dream space before rejoining the story. It can work, but you are destabilizing the story in the process. Hopefully you stick the landing and the story restabilizes. That's the idea, right? You want to restabilize it. I'll skip ahead to some other ones because these are they're all interesting in and of their own right. So we could actually talk about any one of these probably at length. Unclear power bases, all these other, anyway, for characters, how this plays, how you destabilize characters in this. Magical conversations. Now, I cannot tell you how many times I have seen this, and it's bizarre. I think it's a writer who is not doing a good job. Star Wars: The Last Jedi had it. They started communicating with the Force. They're face to face. They're seancing. They're doing all this weird stuff. Why can't the writers come up with a concrete way for these two characters to interact? Why are you, the writer, coming up with this bizarre, never before seen way to communicate? So this magical communication is becoming a new symptom, I've noticed, where writers have to invent bizarre ways for characters to interact. And two subsets of this are conversations with non-existent people and monologues with oneself or imaginary people. So why are you wasting our time with a character talking to someone who's not there, or with a character that doesn't exist, or talking to themselves out loud? Now, the monologue works on stage. It's actually a device for theater. It works less well in films. Again, it can work, but you're destabilizing the story when you do this, because a character interacting with no one is almost always less interesting than a character interacting with someone. Character resurrections. This is a destabilizing force because you are removing the consequence of a death. A lot
so
of
many of these have to do with consequences.
Yes. Well, right. Consequences or things that we rely on as human beings with our experience of the world, the writer is going to take that away. Now, again, if you focus on it, you can make it really compelling, because this is like the one thing that's off in the world or whatever. But you do risk losing the audience. There are people that are like, let the character stay dead. This is becoming a thing now. Don't resurrect the character. Mm-hmm. I saw in the chat, they were talking about Jinx, like no body, no death. Correct. But then the scene where she falls has less meaning. They brought Palpatine back in The Last Jedi. Like, you can't just bring all these characters back. Character resurrection is a character destabilizer. Rapid emotionality, another symptom of bad writing that I'm noticing. When characters are just like angry, or they fall in love immediately, or instant lust is happening, or brooding. Jace in this one is just like, it's just always brooding, and there's no people. Bad writers, I think, are mistaking rapid emotionalism or intense emotionalism as characterization. It is not the same. You are compensating for your lack of characterization by showing a character emoting heavily. And this is becoming a problem that I'm seeing in a lot of stories, and it's frustrating. Yeah, emotion is not a substitution for characterization. And I mentioned it earlier, character shifts versus character changes, where this plagued the Acolyte, by the way. The character just goes, I'm going to change to the good side. Yeah. And then a couple episodes later, they're like, I'm going back to the bad side. nothing really spurned this. They're just changing their positions. This is a very common problem in amateur writing. I used to do it myself a lot. And I used to always think that my character's sudden shift in position was interesting. Well, guess what? It's not. It's not. If your character undergoes real problems and real conflicts, and as a result, they change their mind about something in the world or a person they met, that's character change. And that is almost always extremely satisfying. When you watch on screen a character change, you change. You've seen a model for change. It's one of the most powerful things stories actually deliver is the model for character change. So when a writer cheats us of this by giving us a character shift where they just change their mind about something, it destabilizes it because suddenly now we're like, I don't really understand how that character got there. I'm not sure I understand. Most of us will go along with it, but it is a rapid shift in position. Messianic or deified characters. When you create it, like Neo had this problem in The Matrix Reloaded. He became messianic. It was really hard for the writers to know how to handle him in part 2 of The Matrix because now everyone's like, you're the one. We accept you as the one. You're digital Jesus. And so he's like, thank you. You know, and suddenly they're giving like these like church-like sermons in Zion. And it's like, is this cool? I don't think this is cool anymore. Your character detaches from the rest of us, especially if you deify the character officially and make them into a god. They get detached, and now it's harder for me to relate to that character. Star Wars did a good job of grounding the character. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi, they make fun of how he has to sit on that tree trunk in Return of the Jedi, but they grounded him in a way. They made him a little bit less godlike and a little bit more like Buddy Obi-Wan, who just happens to be a ghost, you know? So deified or messianic characters can be a little detaching and hard to know what to do with because they are detached by definition from the rest of us in society. You can only do so much with these characters. You usually have to kill them off. Game of Thrones had to kill off the Sparrow. Christianity had a problem with Jesus. You know, how long is this guy can hang out with us if he's just above us all? So the messianic or deified characters is a destabilizing element. And then, of course, mirages and illusions are disorienting. Also, constantly disoriented characters. Characters are always like, what's going on? I don't understand. You know, they're going through some sort of mental anguish here. It gets taxing on us, and we don't even know what they're doing anymore. They're always confused on screen. I'm losing interest in this character. You can make it work. Memento, as long as you center it on that destabilizing aspect. Christopher Nolan actually really loves to do this. Christopher Nolan likes to take one or two of these destabilizing elements and really double down on them. And then you get like Inception. You know, the laws of physics aren't the same. You know, you get some of this. So anyway, I'll skip some of the other ones. There is some, constantly interrupted dialogue. When characters can't finish a conversation because someone's always interrupting them, another sign of bad writing. The writers themselves don't know how to end conversations, so they just interrupt them all the time. Hate that. And then finally, and I'll just talk about two of these, battle sequences, destabilizing. If you want to destabilize the film during a battle sequence, remove tactical battle plans. Just show us action and you will destabilize the element because all the action is suddenly confusing and meaningless. You have to, that's why Star Wars, Star Trek, all these shows give us a tactical overview of the battle before showing us the action. You have to do it because then we could follow the action. Plus, you have to know what's at stake. And usually there's progressive levels. If we Helm's Deep, we know that if this wall falls, we retreat to the keep. Then you retreat to the second keep, and so on. And then lack of a coherent strategy. If you just show military leaders pointing and screaming, we don't know what they're doing. That's not really a military leader. We need to know what the military leader's plan is. What is the strategy? What is the other guy or girl? What is her strategy for countering that? So anyway, these are all destabilizing elements in the story. And Arcane had almost all of these. The writers introduced all of these destabilizing elements. That's why in a small window, it can be satisfying. But as a season, I was like, there's no way this is going to hold up over time because the more people think about this, the less sense it's going to make.
Hmm.
They destabilize the entire story. So when I said I believe that it's a story collapse by Act 3 of season 2, this is what I'm referring to. They introduced too many destabilizing elements, too quick, too fast, and in some scenes multiple times. There was one scene, I think, in episode 7 where Victor, deified character, is using magical communication language on a robot which has no free will because it's mind controlled, talking to Jace, who just came out of an abstract landscape. And I was like, that's too much. There's too many things.
That's a great example that helps to really ground the examples you're giving us.
You know the scene I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's talking.
But that just demonstrates it because, I see what you mean.
Right. You're introducing too many unstable elements, and as a result, the story starts to suffer. In fact, there's a line of dialogue spoken by Victor that exemplifies how you can get yourself really lost even in the dialogue with too many abstractions. Victor goes, an anomaly festers beneath the hex gate. I'm not really sure what an anomaly is. I don't know how it festers, but it's festering, whatever this is. And it's beneath the hex gate. I don't even really know what that means. In a cave, in a dungeon, in the ground. But an anomaly festers below the hex gate. Very ambiguous dialogue. I believe, doesn't know, he believes, it has the capacity to complete the Doctor's transformation. Oh, how'd you get there? There's an anomaly festering below the hex gate, and you believe it's going to solve the transformation, which is also a magical issue that takes away character autonomy. And then Ambessa's response is, and this will allow you to evolve others. Folks, we're in dialogue that is all abstractions, and the characters don't even make any more sense. And as a viewer, I'm having a real hard time following this dialogue. I just get a general sense that there's something at the hex gate that will help the Doctor, and Ambessa fills us in that. And if he goes, not only will it help the Doctor, it'll help Victor evolve, which means mind control everybody. So we're really lost in the details. Now, some people could say, "Oh, I followed along perfectly fine." Great, that's great. But as a writer, you probably want to avoid this because the number of people that are going to follow along all this is going to start dropping off rapidly. So anyway,
if anything, that you'll just start to feel a little bit more emotionally disconnected, and you won't really be able to put into words why. But that's probably what it is.
Right, because the writers are and in my opinion, the writers are destabilizing to solve writing problems. Like you said, Brianna, I would have loved to have seen Echo and Jinx. After I saw the dream sequence in an alternate universe, I was like, just show us the real two. They're there. They're both alive.
Mm-hmm.
A good writer would take a stable scenario, not a destabilized scenario, a stable situation, put the real Jinx together, and let's see a relationship actually develop. Guess what? I guarantee everybody would love that, especially if it had the same kind of emotional impact as we saw in the multiverse. And I think all the shippers out there would have loved it. I would have loved it. So if you can provide a concrete version of these issues, a stable version, I think you're doing yourself a favor as a writer, and I think you're giving your readers or audience a chance to really stay invested. And by the way, while I was writing all this down, I went back to season 1 and hit play on episode 7. All of these things were absent. It was, in fact, the scene I happened to randomly pick. It was Kate and Vi talking to each other in a room. And I was like, there's nothing destabilizing this scene. And the writers had the courage to stick it out. They talked to each other for like 3 or 4 minutes. And I was invested in the conversation, even though I just jumped into it. So I was like, stabilize your stories, stabilize your scenes. Don't do what they're doing here. And you're probably going to succeed you'll probably have a successful story if you can do that.
Well,
Awesome.
yeah, this was amazing, Doug. I would say there was a phrase that was used last time we talked that ambiguity is not mystery. So if you just add ambiguity to your story, you're not. So that seems to go along with this idea as well.
That's right.
Actually, I was thinking that I didn't follow season 2 like I think I should have, and I was like questioning myself actually what was going from thing to thing to thing. And I was going to contrast that with the movie Eyes Wide Shut. Okay, so now the movie Eyes Wide Shut, you don't really know exactly what is going on in, overall. There is an element of mystery to that. So,
but there's a sense of structure and functionality that you intuit.
Yes, and you're talking about you are grounded, but nonetheless, in Eyes Wide Shut, I was completely following along a thread, about from scene to scene, even though there was mystery and you're not exactly sure who this woman was, and you're following this thread through this story. So that to me was an example of, okay, we got mystery, but we're leading you all the way through it and you're staying with it and like glued to the screen. Whereas here, okay, your ambiguity or your lack of clarification about what's going on, I'm not being led from scene to scene.
Right. So what they did in Eyes Wide Shut, I would say they disoriented you and destabilized you at very handpicked times. Like when you go into that awesome like sex party, everyone's wearing. It's a destabilizing event because it's not how reality works for most of us, right? We're not going to these parties.
Speak for yourself. I'm kidding.
We all wish we were, but we're in this scenario where people are like openly doing all this stuff, and it's like, whoa. And there's an odd egalitarianism to these parties because people are wearing masks. So it's an oddly it's a destabilizing set. What grounds you? Your primal fascination with all the events going on. You are grounded in your primal attraction to this. So again, you could destabilize stories, and you should. You should try to destabilize your stories once in a while. It'll keep your reader in, but you have to ground it. You have to rein it in, and you cannot introduce so many destabilizing events that now like even magic. The one thing that Arcane seemed to be doing well, did they rein it in, or did magic take over this world to the point of like leaving it in a wasteland? So they did not rein even that one thing in. Anyway, I'm trying to cap myself here.
I hate to admit this. I don't know if it was obvious, but I'm actually really struggling to stay awake.
No,
it's like it hit me that I'm like, it's like, oh my God, it's past my bedtime. I went to bed pretty early yesterday, but yeah, I'm on a 3 a.m. rising time, so I'm gonna have to dip out.
No worries. Okay. Brianna,
well, this was fantastic.
You inspired me to think about it like this, because I was like, how can I talk about this in general terms in a way that I think a writer would definitely understand without acting like I'm just hating on the show? These are the things that when I'm watching, I'm reacting to. It's the same things that plague Game of Thrones. It's the same thing that plagued The Last Jedi. And if you have fun doing this with that list, watch how many destabilizing things on this list are in Arcane season 2 in one episode, and then hop back to any episode in season 1, hit play, and watch how concrete and stable that is, and how beautiful.
I would love to do that across all these controversial stories or where we think the franchise is tanked or something like that. I would love to do that.
This gives a roadmap maybe on what we're reacting to instead of just quote hating on it. You know?
Yeah. Thank you for showing that. All right.
All right.
I guess I'll head on out. I don't know if there were more things from Heath. I might just watch the replay later.
No. I've got one thing that I'll talk to Doug about, I think, but it's more about the story. But so I've covered all of my high level stuff, I think. So okay. I mean, we covered a bunch of stuff here.
Well, and Brianna, I'm glad you definitely got a chance to lay out your case. In fact, everything you said tonight was pretty spot on, and
yeah, it was fantastic.
Educated me on some things as well, so that's great.
That's awesome. All right, well, I will see you all later. I'm like falling asleep.
All right, later.
We'll do it again. Take it easy.
Let's see. Matt, thank you, Brianna. That was fantastic. So let's see. Matt, we have a new person here. Matt, I see Matt in the chat for the
first time. What's happening, Matt?
Matt says, nice to see people actually paying attention. Lose attention talk about sad number of flaws this show had season 2. Well, welcome, Matt. Welcome. Good to see you in the chat. This is for you.
Yeah, well, we're trying to get specific on it in a problem-solving way. It may not be constructive criticism of the show, but it's meant to be constructive criticism for writers, screenwriters, novelists, because it's fun to destabilize a story, right? It's fun to introduce some of these things, but if you do too many, you're probably going to run your audience right off the road. And usually introducing too many is evidence of someone who's not clear about what they're doing as a writer.
Daniel is also here. Hey, Daniel. Welcome. Good to see you.
What's up, Daniel?
Anybody else who's coming in? Yeah, because that's interesting that we could go through a lot of different things that are more specific, which was my first thing that, hey, Kat. Welcome.
What's up,
We
Kat?
talked about that earlier on. Yeah, that was one of Doug's. I think it's fascinating, Doug, that you clued in on one of the writers that is apparently writing a lot of your favorite stuff.
Ash Brannon.
And stuff like that.
Ash Brannon was the big one that I think held it all together in season 1. Because obviously they're the same. A lot of them were the same writers. Not all of them. But there was a lot of similar writers. So they can do it. I think they just needed that one hand, that maestro hand conducting the orchestra to help ground them a little bit. I think it would have paid off.
I still do think
Pat,
a lot
you're right.
about...
They did lose a lot of their talent. Oh, another one, Heath, is lore breaking.
Lore breaking?
Lore breaking.
No, oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Inconsistent lore.
George R. R. Martin is big on that.
Physics. Yeah.
Yeah, lore breaking. I can't wait for you to codify all of these different ones.
Oh, I want to. Yeah, this was a first draft. This was within the last couple hours before the show. Like her having that imaginary discussion with Silco in the jail cell. That's a fake conversation. With a guy who's not really there. You're another destabilization. And then,
but she does do that in season 1.
But okay, that's true. But in this show, they have all these other issues. So doing it again, going back to the well with all these other issues, I think just adds another layer that may not be as effective. I guess my issue too was, and Druden Fuzz called me out on it. I know she didn't mean it in a negative way, but now you have 2 characters together, Jinx and Isha can't talk. So now you have 2 characters together finally in a scene, and only one can do the talking. So it's like, so Druden Fuzz, I think my issue was in a story with all these fake conversations amongst characters who are not in the room, who don't share the setting. Now you put 2 characters together and one doesn't talk.
And I see your point. So so they could have, in that point, that would have given someone for Jinx to talk to who could talk back.
Right.
Because she talked to a lot of people who don't talk back, and she got a physical person who, in this case, actually still couldn't talk back.
Right.
That's interesting.
It's as if the writers were pathologically avoiding actual dialogue at every turn. It was so bizarre. You either had a deified character doing the talking who's out in space somewhere, you had an imaginary character talking to them, or there was a character in front of them who couldn't talk to them. So I was like, man, what are you guys doing with this?
I think I got one more one here, but I think I actually have 2 super chats to go to. I'm sorry. I get caught up in what Doug was saying. So the Titter Pig Rancher, this is when you were talking about magic, Doug. Thank you very much for $5.
Right. Okay.
It says, this is true. Season 1, magic is actually outlawed. The introduction of it represents the main destabilizing element that drives all conflict.
Correct. Absolutely right, Titter Pig. It was the primary destabilizing element that the entire story and all the characters were focused on. And as a result, it gave us, the viewer, a chance to stabilize ourselves in this world with Hex Tech. They did it again, by the way, with Shimmer. Shimmer's a destabilizing story element because it's like a magic, right? It transforms people and all this. But they
you want to broadly understand magic in this conceptualization.
Right, but they grounded us by spending time with it. The writers knew to spend time with Shimmer, because if I can stabilize myself with Shimmer on screen and characters interacting and using Shimmer, now I'm stable. So now when I have an outlandish battle in episode 5 with characters using Hex Tech and using Shimmer, I'm not disoriented at all. I can follow along perfectly because I've stabilized myself with Shimmer, I've stabilized myself with Hex Tech, and now I can watch the scene play out, and the scene feels stable. That's excellent writing. That you could take these these wondrous things that are totally not real and make them feel stable right on screen. And we all sit back and buy it. That's great writing and great animating.
Also, the Titterpig Rancher says for $5, season 1 had multiple conversations. Oh, this is what we were just talking about. Season 1 had multiple conversations with people who weren't there. Jinx talking to ghosts, also Silco talking to Vander's statue. Examples of it done well.
Beautiful. Yeah, my point is don't ever do these things because every story has something that destabilizes it. It's part of what keeps you off balance. I shouldn't say every story. There's probably stories that don't do destabilizations. They might focus on disorienting, but a lot of stories will, especially in like sci-fi, steampunk, fantasy stories. So do them. You just have to ground them. That's my thing. Anchor them somehow. And if you anchor them well, then we'll go along with it.
Okay, so one point, maybe a second one that's minor, but that from a story perspective that we should talk about, or that we could talk about, because this was one of the times that the story did make me think and make me potentially reconsider a lot of things that I had previously thought once potentially true. And it goes back to the weird episode 7. That's the alternate timeline. That's why I like to think about the paradox of this episode 7, that, okay, it doesn't matter. It's but yet people are still drawn to it for a lot of reasons. And one of the things that was fascinating to me is that, okay, you see how things could have been if Vi had died.
Right.
That things are really nice if Vi's dead. If she died in the explosion, I mean, she died in the explosion. It was an event that we had already seen, that we started with. You know exactly what she's talking about when Jinx, or Bedtime Powder, says, you gave us that. You gave us the tip, and oh my God, that hits you at the same time, and then you realize, okay, that Vi is dead. And everything is so much better. So that did have me questioning myself, because so many things that I had said in our previous analysis was like, okay, this needs to be a show about how we're going to kill Jinx. Vi, because after the rocket goes off, I had definitely had an approach to this that Vi's got to come to grips with killing her. I thought it was okay that, yeah, she has the chance with Kate and doesn't take it, but then she's got to come to grips with that and whatever. And we've got, especially if in a series like what Brianna laid out, where you actually do have the war, and you're fighting Jinx versus Vi, as leaders of the two different sides or whatever. So all throughout all of that, my point was that I had thought, okay, it's Jinx that's got to die. So it did make me rethink my position. Like, is that right? Oh, is it true that actually, what if Vi were dead? And would that have actually solved everything? No, am I wrong about that? Everything was based around the death of Jinx, but actually, if just Vi had kicked it early on, there would be no problem. I thought that was an interesting question. To deal with, because it did invert a lot of everything that I was thinking. But then I thought, okay, actually, if that's it, well, okay, and they do follow through with that. Actually, when Vi is in the jail cell, and when Kate comes in, and Vi's like, every decision I've made is wrong. And I'm like, okay, I didn't go through and rethink every decision, but I'm like, okay, that is following through on that line of thought that, gee, is everything that she's done wrong? And so if we had just eliminated her early, that would have been easy. That would have been easier. But then I thought, if that's the case, what character should you have revealed that Vi's death would have changed everything to? Jinx. Not Echo. I'm sorry?
Jinx, right? Powder?
Well, I was going to say to Vi herself.
Oh, okay. Like almost like a reverse of It's a Wonderful Life. It's a terrible life.
I wrote down a reverse of A Christmas Carol.
Well, we're on the same page at least.
Yeah. So I thought, well, gee, if I were going to do that, though, I think I would have revealed it to Vi herself. And then that would have given her the reason to go, every decision I have made is wrong. blah, blah, blah. Maybe I should be dead. It's still weird because I don't think I would
she
do
could
that.
lose her confidence.
Yeah.
You could
I
lose
don't
your
think I would do
confidence
it
if you
still because
realize
of
that you've been on the wrong side.
Yeah, alternate universes and things like that. But that did make me think. That did make me think. So you have to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed episode 7 on some level. But again, the rewatchability is going to be hard because I'll probably never watch all of these. I'll probably never watch all of season 2 again unless it's to study it for storytelling purposes. But I would have to appreciate it like by putting it in an envelope and just saying, okay, this never really happened. Like a scrapbook. It's kind of this, weird detached storytelling that's become real popular. I could appreciate it at that level, but it'll never have the kind of punch I think it was meant to have had they developed this organically somehow or if they did this in a way that was stabilized.
Titter Pig says episode 7 is a travesty. It undermines everything about the themes of Arcane up to this point, made worse by the fact that it's all a dream or here an alternate universe.
Yeah, listen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
you're right. You're right, Titter Pig. But when I was rewatching it, I was over it. I watched it. I was like, this is terrible. Like, I didn't like it. But when I rewatched it, and I didn't care because I'm not invested in the show. I was like, actually, this is a cool little segment. It's just cool to see. It's cool to see Powder. It's cool to see those characters from episode 1 again, her friends. So there was something charming about it. But again, the second that episode was over, it's like, wow, this doesn't really fit anywhere.
As soon as you realize that, okay, this isn't going anywhere. Yeah. What do we think about the messaging of Singe?
It was okay. He had a backstory for what he was doing. Like there was some effort to set him up.
Yeah, because I've just seen, and I hadn't thought about this too much, but I've just seen that like he's the only one who wins. That he's a terrible guy, and I didn't even pick up on that because I was probably already kind of zoned out by the end of that. But I went back to watch that he does get his daughter back. And he's so much the cause of all of this. We're talking about our
season 1, by the way. Yeah.
And at the end, in the ending montage, he does have his daughter back as something, and he's looking in the mirror over her shoulder.
I know, but how invested in him are you? Not much.
Well, no, I don't think much. But when we're talking about what's the theme and end of the story, and Brianna was questioning that at the end, that we do have one of the most evil characters, who is, has done all these different things. He gets what he wants at the end of the story. That's what I've seen most talked about with him, is that we have a character. You're talking about a character that, of all the characters who get bad endings or whatever else, he got exactly what he wanted. He knew exactly what he wanted at the beginning. I need to bring my daughter back to life. And, he does the shimmer and all of this. And he even is the cause of Victor coming back, because he's rerouting Warwick's blood through him and all of that. And then at the end, he escapes the battle and he gets his daughter back. That's interesting. As far as what does that mean? And that may be Drudenfuzz says Singe and his daughter are mostly fan service to the people who know the game.
Right. I believe that.
But that is still an interesting point when you're talking about the messaging. It's interesting.
You're right.
It's interesting to me that we do end up talking about a lot of messaging here because, I would have often said previous to a lot of our discussions, this whole study, that's like, the story doesn't have to have a message. It doesn't have to be saying anything. It doesn't have to be about anything. It can just be about itself. And now I feel like I am on the other side of that. That I'm like, okay, that it doesn't have to be a direct allegory for something, but that a core part of the story is going to be the theme or central interrogation. We're going to talk about that term specifically with James Bacon and the Titter Pig Rancher. Now I think it's essential. And so like when I look at scenes like that and what is its meaning, how does it fit with what is the overall theme, or the realization, how do you deal with thematically the idea that things would be better if Vi is dead? Is that part of your theme? Is that part of the story? Maxwell Alexander Drake is definitely like, if it doesn't fit with your theme, it's got to go, and that's part of telling a coherent story. So I'm gonna have to think about that.
Well, but remember, there could be sub themes and multiple themes. I think a lot of times, like what you might be adverse to is the idea of inserting a theme by force into your story. Sometimes you think you have a theme and then your characters resolve this story. And when you look back, you're like, actually, the theme and the characters defined it. The story defined it. The resolution of the story you created creates a theme that's there inherently. So when you say you do think it's essential, yes, I think it's essential because I don't think it's avoidable. I think if you create a character with no theme or a story with no theme, then you might have trouble finding a through line in the story. And so maybe the resolution doesn't even make sense if there's no theme to it.
All right. Well, is there anything else we need to say? I mean, I think we covered everything that was on my list that was high level, and like those might have been lower level things to talk about, but I think still fun. But I think between what you said and what Brianna said, I tried to inject my examples whenever you and Brianna were talking when they came up naturally. So
okay, right on.
I don't have like another list of things to go through.
Yeah, I actually created an entire list of just questions. Some of them I knew the answers to and was just curious to see if people could remember because the story moves so fast. Other things I genuinely am asking because I have no clue. And then 3, some of them were just set up, like what exactly are wild runes? What exactly is the Black Rose? Talk about ambiguity, destabilizing ideas.
Black Rose, yeah.
Yeah, these are destabilizing. That's another form of magic and mind control. So another destabilizing force. You just have constant destabilizers in Arcane, and it was just too much. The show, as brilliant as season 1 was, I feel like by the time we got to Act 3, the show could not sustain it. They could not balance all of this, and that's why it collapsed. Yeah, did you know? And somebody help me with this. So Kate and Vi end up conspiring to betray Ambessa, right? Remember, they meet. They're like, okay, I'll bring you in as a prisoner. They did the old Chewie and Luke,
right? Prior to the prisoner scene, right? Yeah,
right. So they go into to Ambessa's pavilion, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm not a prisoner, and they attack, and they attack the bodyguard, and then Vi punches that thing, and it throws this electrical net around Ambessa. What happened next? How did Ambessa get out of that? Because when I skipped ahead, I could not find any resolution to that. So they either left her there, like they captured her and they walked away. Can anyone in the chat help me with that? How did Ambessa get out of that? Vi and Kate are right there. They just betrayed her. They've got her captured. How'd she get out of it? Because she shows up and storms the city and all that. So I when I was rewatching it, and I was skipping ahead, so maybe I missed it. But shoot her way out. It seems like an unresolved plot point. And no matter what anyone tells me the resolution is, I think it's going to be unsatisfying because it would result in somehow Vi and Kate didn't capture Ambessa, obviously. Okay, I can answer that. Okay, here we go. Zero the Blade. That's what I was looking. Wild runes are pure mana. Oh, well, okay, he's answering the other question. Wild runes are pure mana stones that can change physics. Black Rose are a secret undercover group that causes problems within Noxus to seize control. Oh, I thought it was a form of magic. Well, I'll just say Zero the Blade. Thank you for that. I would just say that I think a lot of audience members would probably be pretty confused
Well,
about
I
that.
I did think I knew that the Black Rose was a secret undercover group that was causing trouble in Noxus. I mean that
Oh, okay.
I picked
I
up
actually
on
didn't
that,
understand.
but um,
Well, then what's up with all the like they would always be in another abstract setting, with the chains, right? And the black rose growing out of her face. What was all that? Is that just they just use magic to cause trouble?
well, the one of the things that I thought, like I thought that the it's not explicitly told, but I thought that the general idea that, as it turns out, why Ambessa had showed up to Piltover anyway was not because she was coming over in strength, but they found out that she's actually coming over in weakness, that she'd been driven out of wherever she was from. Somebody talks about her holding and something being taken away, and that she was coming over to Piltover. That in the background, maybe she was driven away from something, from her power base, and that she was going to use Piltover as her new power base. And that's actually why it surprised me. I was actually surprised when I found out there was going to be a battle, because like when she's like, I can take you to underneath the hex gate or whatever you need to be, I thought that was like, well, like I'm kind of like important in that city. I'll just take you there. Right? I'll just tell the guards I'm walking. Like, actually, that's what I thought in the very beginning. Maybe that was, so it actually surprised me that there was, okay, we're headed to a fight, because I was like, no, I didn't think that she wanted to destroy the city because it was going to be her new power base. So, yeah, I don't know. So
I
yeah, there's a
remember
lot of
that
things like
new
that
power
that we
base.
can get into, but but probably pointless. I think this was a fantastic discussion on the high level.
Yeah, it was
issue.
definitely fun, and it was nice having people who know the lore better than us in
Yes.
there. My point isn't that it's bad to have the lore in there or anything or whatever, but what I'm saying is I doubt the audience could follow all of this. It was too many. I think if you know the lore, this might have been. It's possible that this would have been easier to watch, but I seriously doubt normies would be able to follow along some of this. So. Anyway, it's just a lot of destabilizing elements.
When you're talking about a lot of the deep destabilization or the ambiguity, I mean, that does allow people to go, no, I do get it. Like, because if you fill in a bunch of things on your own, then you can. I mean, I guess, or
Well, because you're not. So the writers are not subjecting themselves to the laws of physics. They're not subjecting themselves to time. They're not subjecting themselves to the autonomy of the individual characters. They're not subjecting themselves to the same universe. They're not they're not the writers are not subjecting themselves to anything when they add all these destabilizing elements in there. Everything's a dream. Everything, they can just make up anything they want on the spot. That's why pockets of this might work, but they're not doing their job as writers by introducing all of these destabilizing elements. Yeah, mind control was in there. I mean, everything. Time travel, timelines, variant characters, multiverses, abstract settings, magic that took over, mind control, inconsistent laws of physics, supernatural intervention, whatever, dreams. I mean, all of it's in there. And it's just, I don't know if I've seen all of them in a show packed in like this, but they did it. They went for it.
All right, what are we looking forward to next, Doug? Is there something coming out in pop culture and modern storytelling? Because I've got a whole bunch of backlog on ancient stories to talk about.
Well, I know Sonic comes out. I know my kids are ready to see Sonic Part 3.
Oh, I didn't know.
But I don't know if our crowd is as into it as me.
Yeah, I don't know. Gladiator wasn't on my radar. Even though maybe
it wasn't. I'll probably see it when it comes out on streaming. Wicked, I feel like I should watch to study for hero and centric storytelling, but I'm afraid I'm not going to like it. I don't know. Yeah, Sonic 3 does look great. Like, I'm excited about it. My kids are excited about it. So yeah, Sonic 3 is a big one in this household. Let's see, movie schedule. And by the way, I just want to go on record as saying I'm really disappointed that Arcane Season 2 wasn't the hit that Season 1 was. I have been looking forward to this show for quite a long time. season 2.
Well, me too. I did not want to just hate it for no reason. So I'm glad also we
Right.
found a group of people who for actual reasons that we went to. Yeah, actually, let me put the Discord server links. I was just about to put give everybody some links. So if you're new here and you would like to be part of the Raven Keep Discord, we would love to have you. So I'm going to put that right here. So this is the Raven Keep Discord server. That's our hub for this and a bunch of different channels. Raven Keep Discord server. And we've had like at some point we've had 35 people watching live. So this has been great.
Yeah, this crowd was outstanding. I love that we had people that really knew the lore. We had people that had some very strong and different takes. So it was a good crowd all around. Oh, Heath. And again, I saw the trailer, which didn't excite me as much, but War of the Rohirrim is coming out in December.
Oh yeah. I have not watched. I know almost nothing about that. But possibly. I mean,
Okay.
I am a big Lord of the Rings fan, so we'll have to see. When is that coming out?
Craven the Hunter. Sonic. I'm just going through the release schedule. Terrifier. Nosferatu.
Oh,
Nosferatu.
Oh, we talked about that with Brianna.
Yeah, we've got to watch Nosferatu. Skeleton Crew. We could probably talk about Skeleton Crew.
Is that a Star Wars one?
It's Star Wars. It looks like suburban. Star Wars in suburbia with aliens. It looks like it's aimed for kids. Who knows if it's good or not? I feel like Star Wars is God, someone said it the other day, and for the first time in my life, I was like, Star Wars? Like that old thing? Like, I don't know. It was the first time it didn't have any effect on me.
So tomorrow morning, let me bring this up, and we'll put up, Doug, your stuff too. So tomorrow morning, we're going to be over on the Heath's Geekverse channel. So if you are new, I do run a few different channels. This is the tabletop focus channel, Heath's Geekverse. We're working on creating an RPG over there for different, a general RPG for different worlds. So Heath's Geekverse, I just put the link in there. So I believe I already created the, oh, yep. So that's tomorrow. That's tomorrow morning at 9:30. That's on the Morning Grind. So the Morning Grind live stream, that's live on Sundays and Wednesdays in the mornings. So we will be talking about RPG design in the morning. Then tomorrow night, we are going to be on the Cultist channel. So the Cultists, if you don't know, is the web show that I created with Brianna De Silva. So let me put the Cultist in here, who was on here. The Cultist. I'm the creator, producer, and co-writer. Brianna was the co-writer and director of the show. It's a show about modern-day Lovecraftian cultists who just want to worship Cthulhu in a world full of people who don't understand. And so tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, Brianna's behind the scenes. Brianna, who was on the stream. We're talking about Brianna, who was on the stream. Brianna's behind the scenes of season 1, episode 2 will be live. They'll be about, 7 minutes long. The making of the cultist comedy, Cthulhu comedy, right here. And then immediately after that airs, James Bacon and I will be live talking about the role-playing game that we designed for the cultists. So all of that's going
on.
So there's a lot of streaming going on. So the Raven Keep Discord server is where, I always post whenever I'm going live. So that's going. There's a lot going on here. Doug, where do you want me to send people to for you? Where do we go here?
For me, for everyone new, some of you guys already know who I am, but I'm an author, and you can find me on my website, douglasaburton.com. I wrote a book. I wrote a couple books, but my latest is on story structure. So if you're a writer, screenwriter, memoirist, even an RPG player, because a story is, or at least setting and things like that are part of it. I wrote a book called The Heroine's Labyrinth, and it's an alternative story structure to the hero's journey, one that I found by studying heroine-centric stories. So if you go to my website, there's a little video there. It gives you a little introduction of the first archetype. The book has started winning some awards, so hopefully I can keep that going. I'm very excited about that. It won the Biba Award for Best Writing Craft Book of 2024. And we talk about it a lot here on Table Talk. So Heath, in particular, has helped introduce some of these ideas to the public. So if you're interested, give it a shot.
All right. Well, All right. Well, I guess that wraps us. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us tonight. The chat was amazing. Appreciate it so much. And thank you to everybody who will be watching this on replay. Thank you for being with us. We hope to see you live next time we are live, which will be next Tuesday. Who knows? Maybe there might be another stream before then. The Ravenkeep Discord server is the place to be. I know we got Thanksgiving coming up. So have a wonderful night. Everybody, as I said, go forth, be creative, be constructive. I will see you in the morning for the morning grind on the Heath.
And like and subscribe if you're still watching. Click subscribe.
Yes,
join Heath,
please do.
And then join Heath tomorrow on Heath's Geekverse.
Yes. All right. Later, everybody.